Well, that was I think there might be a. Let's see if that's, well, not much better, no.
Ooh, seems to be working.
That does seem to have worked, although it's very loud. Yeah. That sounds, that sounds much better. The volume's adjusted as well. Well, I'm sorry for that technical hitch. Technology is wonderful when it works, which is all too seldom. Well, good evening. I'm Councillor Clive English, and as Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I welcome you to this meeting. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast live and recorded for playback. If anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, could you please let me know now? That's not to stop you, that's just so that everyone is aware that that's taking place. So is anyone else recording? No, that's good to know. Members are reminded that they should address the meetings through their microphones, and remember to turn them off when they have finished speaking. Additionally, could members please make sure that their mobile phones are either off or on silent mode or not present, as that can rather break up the meeting. If the fire alarm does sound, as there is no test scheduled, we will assume that it is genuine, and the Democratic Services Officer will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. As there is at least one contentious item on the agenda this evening, a couple of housekeeping points. It is the tradition of this council to encourage public engagement and participation, but debate needs to take place in a calm manner where members on either side of the discussion are listened to courteously and without any sense of pressure being put on them to reach a particular decision. So in the event that there is applause or a large amount of banner waving, I very sadly will have to ask the people doing so to leave. Now, on that note, which I don't want to sound harsh, but it is necessary for conducting a meeting, I'll turn to the actual business of the evening. First of all, item 1, apologies for absence, and they have been received from Councillor Eagle. I'm not aware of any other apologies. I have one substitute, I believe, Councillor Jeffrey.
And Councillor Jeffrey for Councillor Eagle.
Item 3, urgent items. There is an urgent update in relation to item 14, the receipt of the call-in relevant procedure. As it relates to the consideration of this item, I would like to be able to take that as an urgent update this evening. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Whilst it's not an urgent item, I also intend to take item 13, committee work programme, after item 15. Reference from the Council, notice of motion, rights of the River Medway and its tributaries, given the public participation for their item 14, and to allow the committee to review the work programme fully after having considered the motion from Council. The reason for that is it actually does impact on what the work programme might be, and doing it the other way around just seems a bit potty because we'd probably end up discussing it twice. Is that agreed? Okay. Item 4, visiting members. Are there any visiting members other than the appropriate cabinet members who are here? No. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures? Technically not, because you signed the call-in. So. Sorry, are you?
Pardon, Chairman, I've just realised that some papers were left on the desks for this evening and I don't appear to have a set. I may not be the only person. The procedure and... Thank you, Chairman.
Going back to disclosures from members and officers, Councillor Cleater.
Disclosure for transparency. We've got the discussion on the community wardens. I'm the chair of the Unison branch that represents those staff at KCC.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Cleater. Can I ask our members to speak directly into the microphone, because otherwise it's quite hard to pick up. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. I have been lobbied on, I think, every item on the agenda, but in particular on the call-in item by a number of people, including the Councillor Kimantz. So I need to declare that. Any other declarations of lobbying? Anyone not been lobbied on item 14? Okay. So Councillor Webb and Hinder. Any other items people have been lobbied on? I've been lobbied on all of the agenda, but Councillor Jeffrey.
I've also been lobbied on 15 and 17.
15 and 17. Councillor Round.
17.
Thank you very much. I think that's everyone. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hasty.
And probably item 15.
15. Okay, thank you. Item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I'm not aware of anything that needs to be exempt unless any member wishes to discuss item 18, part 2 minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of August. So unless members want to discuss those minutes, I propose that we take everything in public. Is that agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Moving rapidly on to item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of August. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No one's saying anything. Therefore, I move that the minutes of the meeting of the 15th of August be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Item 9, presentation of petitions. There was going to be a petition this evening in relation to the River Lem, but because of the wording of the petition, that petition is going directly to the Cabinet tomorrow instead. So sadly, we still haven't broken our duck on petitions, but I was always hopeful on that one. Item 10, question and answer session for local residents. There are no questions this evening from local residents. Item 11, questions from members to the chairman, if any, and sadly there are no questions from members this evening. So move forward to the issue relating to the Cabinet Forward Plan, which we have on the papers. Are there any comments on that? No, well, that may be affected by our comments on the work programme later, but at the moment, no comments. So is that agreed for noting? Thank you. Right, moving on, committee work programme we're doing later, so we move directly to receipt of the call-in relevant procedure on this. So we have a couple of public speakers on this. Normally we wouldn't we have the report before the public speakers? Sorry, be with me in a minute. Sir. Yes. I was just checking because that is an unusual order of doing things, but it does appear to be the correct procedure for this. It's something that we perhaps need to address at some point, because normally in all other council meetings you have the report before you have the public speakers, but I have checked and this is the correct procedure, but in the constitution it probably needs revising because that's bonkers. But we are where we are, so can I ask Sandra Manser to please come forward and address the committee? You're going to use either one on the either end.
Thank you, Chairman. Climate change is happening. We see it nightly on TV. Floods, wildfires, storms, melting ice sheets, all caused by heating of the planet, fueled by human activity such as pumping pollutants into the atmosphere. To reverse this, we are urged to plant trees, but here we are, faced with an application to destroy 80,000 trees in Oakham Woods. We know what we'll lose locally: public amenity, clean air, along with wildlife and habitats, which cannot be replaced. Soil, once removed, can never be put back in the same order, and plant species such as bluebells and wood anemones, which both grow at different depths, will be lost. These are rare and have taken centuries to be established. There is a saying along the lines, If a butterfly flaps its wings in the Sahara Desert, it will cause, given time, a hurricane somewhere else in the world. If a small insect can have such an effect, what will the result of the loss of Oakham Woods be? Everything in nature is connected, so the loss of 80,000 trees will, without doubt, not only affect our local environment, but go to add to the overall tree reduction nationwide. Oakham Woods is known as the lungs of Maidstone. This area will be affected. The late Queen started a legacy, the Queen's Green Canopy. KCC and NBC answered the call by planting many trees, but to allow the quarry to expand will undo all the good work done so far by local authorities. I ask councillors to show your support for the environment, listen to the people and refuse the application. Chairman, I spent 4 decades as a parish councillor, and in that time not one clerk failed to act on the council's requests when it came to writing a letter. Never was the wording or the inference ignored. If such adherence to councillors' wishes can be respected at the grassroots level, then surely at the borough level it is even more important that democracy lives and is shown to live. I urge the council not to send Councillor Cooper's undemocratic and totally biased letter to KCC. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask people not to indicate applause or boos on anything said. I'm very clear about this, and it will not happen. Miss Rodwell, come forward, please.
That one. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Jones and Councillor Sams for challenging a decision made by one individual to act against the advice of a committee set up to support the premise that decisions made within this council are well thought out and within the best interests of the community. The failure to grasp the enormity of the threat to the biodiversity of Oakham Wood was robustly challenged by both members of the public and councillors alike within the last PIDPAC meeting. We were reminded that under NPPG rules that there would have to be unequivocal evidence of wholly exceptional circumstances as to why the expansion into Oakham Wood could possibly go ahead. Despite the committee's final vote of 7-2, urging that a new strong letter of opposition be sent to KCC, this was ignored, and instead it was simply amended by sharing the concerns of the advisory committee, and the letter as it stands still supports the quarry extension. Now, this calls into question the viability of the committee system, where members could, in theory, listen to advice but habitually not follow it. And it therefore begs the question, what is the point of an advisory committee if decisions as important as this one, with widespread implications for community, environment, and the risk of setting a precedent for similar encroachments onto protected ancient sites, could be unilaterally pushed through, ignoring the advice to the contrary? So it's for this reason I would ask that if the advice of a planning advisory committee is not going to be listened to, then this matter be brought before the full council to vote on, so that whatever the outcome, at least the public would be satisfied that a democratic process had taken place. Now, the members of the full council, prior to deciding whether to support this expansion or not, would need to familiarise themselves with government guidelines regarding proposed developments on ancient woodland so they can make an informed decision and not one that might suit a political agenda. So they need to understand why there needs to be wholly exceptional circumstances to destroy ancient woodland, because under section 021 of the National Planning Practice Guidance, plantation ancient woodland has equal protected status as that of an ancient woodland site.
I'm afraid you've just literally come to the end
And
of your
that
time.
is the end. Thank you.
I'm warning people for the last time. Right, now I would ask the officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So the report outlines the relevant procedure in relation to the call-in received concerning the decision made in relation to the Council's response to the Kent Minerals and Waste Plan Review consultation. The committee is asked to consider the decision against the call-in request received, and this is outlined in Appendices 1 and 2 to the report. The available options to the committee are outlined in the table at point 2.3 of the report, and these are to either agree that no further action is required, recommend an alternative decision for consideration by the Cabinet member, or recommend that the decision be reviewed by the full Council. And I'd also like to highlight that if it's reviewed by full Council, the powers of full Council in considering the matter would be the same as this committee. So they would also be able to review the matter, agree that no further action is required, or recommend an alternative decision to the Cabinet member. I'd also like to highlight as well the urgent update to the report, which is the Pied Pack minute from the consideration of the matter at the meeting at the 6th of September, which as of yesterday was amended and agreed by the Policy Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. As this is a complicated discussion, if any member is confused about the procedure at any point, please do stick your hand up and ask, because we don't want people to be suffering in ignorance, because we have not done many call-ins for obvious reasons the last few years. Right, now I'm going to turn to the members present who were responsible for the call-in. Do you have any particular preference, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Jones, as to who goes first?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I must say I've done 2 call-ins now in my 18 months. Apologies for that. This is the second. I don't want to rehash revisit the debate that we had at the Pied Pack. That set out a lot of key issues and persuaded that committee to that we should strongly oppose, as a council, we should strongly oppose the quarry plan. That committee, we heard things like the fact that 98% of the rock being quarried is going to be used for infrastructure, just 1% of it goes to heritage restoration. We heard that soil is irreplaceable, ancient woodland soil is irreplaceable, and that we've already heard from one of the speakers about the NPPF's position in terms of its strong position on strong protection requirements. In terms of, I was listening to the Kent County Council's Environment Chair earlier today, and it's very clear that some of these issues have not yet filtered up and are not yet understood by some Kent County councillors. I heard the chair of that committee describe the woodland as not being ancient. He was set correct, but that's the chair of the Environment Committee on KCC, which is really worrying. So I've called this in. As we've heard, the Pied Pack voted 7-2 to ask for a strong letter of objection to be sent, and that strong letter of objection was not sent. A letter supporting it, a caveated support, was sent instead. Indeed, the words in that caveated support were identical to some of the discussions that were voted against. So the letter does not represent the overwhelming and cross-party recommendation from the Pied Pack, and therefore I think this needs further debate. I also want to point out that this is an issue of national importance. 50 hectares is a bigger loss than HS2 and Lower Thames Crossing ancient woodlands combined. And as we've heard, there is this very strong protection in the MPPF. So we are talking about something of national importance. And therefore, not only do I want a further discussion and rethink of the issues, but I also would like that referral to go on to full council so that everybody, every member on this council can have that input and say on what the response of this council should be. So my recommendation will be for our committee to refer it to full council for further debate.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Jones, if you'd like to speak now.
Thank you, Councillor English. I'm here tonight to support the call-in put forward by Councillor Jeffrey. I think it's outrageous that after much debate at the Pied Pack meeting on the 7th of September, the express wishes of the committee were ignored. I actually wondered after the meeting, what's the point of a pack? I know I'm a new councillor to Maidstone Borough Council, but I just felt that maybe we come along here night after night and nobody takes any notice of us. So if that's the case, what is the point of us? By ignoring our wishes, this gives a very loud, a very bad impression of this council to residents, many of whom already feel that voting is a waste of time, and by ignoring our vote on the 7th, this just reinforces their views. It's created a very bad image of MBC in the local and national press, plus organisations such as the Woodland Trust and Kent Wildlife Trust. At the Pact on 7th of September, as we've heard already, there was a cross-party majority of 7-2 to withdraw the original letter and issue a new one with the wording, given unacceptable habitat loss, MBC are unable to support the proposed quarry extension. Our wishes were very clear.
I'm not opening the debate yet. As the three members have indicated, can ask questions of the presenters at this point. Are they questions you want to ask? Because the debate will follow the Cabinet members' presentation.
No, sorry, Clive, I hadn't actually finished.
Oh, sorry, I thought you'd finished then.
No, I hadn't finished, thank you. Instead of doing what we asked, the amended letter talks about concerns that the proposed allocation lies within the local wildlife site and an ancient woodland, and goes on to say, should KCC demonstrate exceptional circumstances in accordance with the MPPF, the MBC requires maximum mitigation and restoration of the site. I don't know how much clearer myself and the committee members on the 7th could have made ourselves. There is no acceptable mitigation for the destruction of soils which have laid untouched for at least 400 years and very possibly for many hundreds of more years than 400. The definition of an ancient woodland is that it's been continuously planted since the 1600s. Not that the trees have been there since the 1600s, but that soil has been untouched since then. How can you replace it? You can't. Once an ancient woodland has been destroyed, it's lost forever. I feel strongly that the vote taken on the 7th should be upheld, and we must tell KCC we're totally opposed to the quarry extension, and I fully support the request that this goes to full council for debate.
Okay, we're not on a position of moving motions yet, or on a general debate. Are the three people who indicated wanting to ask a question of the members who made the call in? Otherwise, the debate will follow the Cabinet members' comments. Question, Councillor Blackmore.
My question is quite a simple one. The consultation has finished. It finished 8 weeks ago. Has the decision been made by Kent County Council? Because my understanding is the particular committee has met. So where are we on that timeline? Because if the decision has been made, then whether another letter is sent or whether the matter goes to full council actually becomes academic. So that's my question, please.
I think that might be something that I would ask Councillor Cooper to address if he is able in his remarks, or the officers with him. That would be very helpful to know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So the original consultation response was sent pending my pending formal ratification to Kent County Council. I think it's quite important to note that now not only is the consultation closed, the results of the consultation have been published. It has been discussed at Kent County Council's Environment Committee last Thursday, and it was stated there by the Cabinet member that the process is now moving forwards. As a result of the number of objections which have been received to the, in particular, the Hermitage Quarry, there is a new call for sites exercise to see if there could be an alternative to that site, which we have stated that should an alternative arise, we would respond to any further consultation in due course. I think it's quite important now that any consultation response that we submit is essentially null and void. The boat has been missed. Any strengthening of our position that I intended to make last week can no longer go ahead as a result of that moving forwards. I think it's also very important to note that this isn't an extension of Hermitage Quarry. This is actually to keep the quarrying activity going. Their existing planning permission will expire. The existing area which they are quarrying will run out. My understanding is that Gallagher's will not be increasing their overall mining capacity. They will merely be extending the periods that they're mining for. Largely, the reason for my initial letter supporting the quarry, subject to suitable mitigation, was the 180 jobs, which are very specifically related to quarrying in that area, the loss of which I think would be pretty catastrophic. The existing infrastructure for the processing of the aggregates, which is conducted on site, so should an alternative site be found, potentially at sea or elsewhere in the county, either new processing infrastructure would need to be erected, or the alternative would be at great expense and damage to the environment, a large amount of road or rail freight to, let's be honest, it will be road freight to the existing site at Hermitage Quarry to be processed there. The alternatives would be importing ragstone. Imported ragstone can't be used in the same way for heritage buildings because of the way that it discolours. So heritage buildings will need to be, if you want to keep them to the current standard, would need to be local ragstone. 1% of what is mined, what is quarried, sorry, at Hermitage Quarry, as per their existing planning condition, must be kept back for precisely for that. I think going back to the technicality of the consultation, I don't think there is very much we can do now until we know the outcome of the new call for sites exercise, whether Hermitage Quarry will be included going forwards or whether an alternative location will be selected. Should no alternative site come forward, we will get a chance as a council and individually to respond to Regulation 19 of the Kent Minerals plan. I don't know that there's much more I can say really that that isn't already available to councillors.
Just a question following that up. The committee has received the report on the consultation response. So has the cabinet member signed? How does that work? Has the cabinet member received the committee report yet?
The committee report from where? Sorry, from here or Kent County Council?
No, the Kent County Council one.
Yeah, I watched the debate at Kent County Council on Thursday. It's a slightly different governance arrangement at KCC. So the report was for noting. The cabinet member stated there that they intend to move forwards. As it currently stands, there is a new call for sites exercise, and obviously, should an alternative site arise, then they will look to progress that in tandem with the rest of the plan.
I was just trying to explore how much of the Kent County Council's internal decision-making process was still to be made.
It's largely a technical exercise. I mean, obviously the plan will have to be adopted by full council at some stage, but in terms of sites, and my understanding is unless an alternative site comes forward, then there isn't actually a decision to be made at this stage until the plan is formulated going forwards.
So what you're saying is there'd be a significant time lag between this response from the committee and it will then go to the cabinet member, then it might go to full council because the regulation 18 will have to be signed off. It doesn't just go through a committee for its advice. So if any, just bear with me procedurally, so if we were minded to send any further information, it couldn't be a response to this particular consultation. It would have to go, we would have to make representations to other bodies within the county council who have yet to sign off on this process, or hold fire to the regulation 019, or a combination of both.
To be perfectly honest, a combination of both is probably the most effective course of action, but yes, you are essentially right. This consultation has been reported on. It's long.
I was just trying to think this through, because if we were going to go anywhere with this, we would need to tweak where we're sending the response to within the county council. I think I've got that right. Any questions to the cabinet member and officers on that? Okay, then I'll go back to Councillor Jeffrey very briefly.
I also watched the footage on the debate on Thursday. To say it was discussed would be perhaps an exaggeration. I think that what I saw within the papers, and I read the papers as well, in terms of the timetable, there was a full report going to the November Environment and Transport Committee, and a plan for it to go to full council, KCC Council in December. My reading of that is that full report hasn't yet been finalised, and therefore we do have an opportunity to influence it.
I don't disagree with you, Councillor Jeffrey. I'm just saying that were we to make further representations, technically it wouldn't be on this consultation. It would be tweaked to make representations directly to the committee and or the cabinet member. So I'm just trying to make sure we don't end up having a debate about something we can't do, and have a debate about something we may be able to do instead, if that's helpful. Councillor Cleater, you indicated before, and then it'd be Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I seconded the motion, and I think what we're here to talk about today was a clear steer was given, which was opposition to withdraw the letter and send a letter basically of opposition to that, and that didn't happen for whatever reason. I think what is clear is that the feedback, and it was cross-party, everyone from all parties agreed after a very long and varied debate. So for me, the issue is, what is Maidstone Borough Council's position on this to KCC, whether it's part of the consultation. As someone who knows KCC very well, they like to get the answer they want out of their consultations, doesn't matter what they're consulting on. What we're here to do is to say we've listened to the representations of what came to that committee, and following that, our position and recommendation was to withdraw the letter and send opposition. So to me, the clear indication tonight is that we should listen to what was said at that meeting, the PIDE meeting, which I was at, that we agree with the action that was recommended cross-party, whether it goes as response to a consultation that's closed, whether it goes when it goes to the next stage. What the public want to hear is that Maidstone Borough Council is opposed to this. And for me, that's the question coming here tonight. And that's what I think we should be dealing with. We can get into the technicalities about who we write to, who's going to receive it, but I think what people want to hear is that following that Pied committee, the cross-party view was we oppose that, and I think that's what we're here to discuss tonight in whatever way we can send it to KCC. What KCC then choose to do with it and how they deal with it is then a KCC matter.
So just checking whether we could slightly vary the decision if we made, or whether it was within the rules, and apparently it is. So I'll come back to that in a minute. Councillor Webb.
Beg your pardon, sorry. I've heard the concerns from colleagues across the chamber, and I think we need to I'd like to make a couple of technical points here, in that I accept fully that the decision that was made at PI was cross-party. The vote at the time was 7 votes to 2, but it is an advisory committee. It isn't a decision-making committee. It advises the cabinet member on what is put before them. It is then up to the cabinet and the cabinet committee member of the borough council to take heed of their advice and either accept it or not. Now, clearly, the cabinet member and cabinet had a differing view to the committee, and the letter was altered and it was sent off. Now, there's nothing we can do about that. However we feel about it, there's nothing we can do about it. The way forward, I would suggest, is that members of the public have heard quite clearly that the decision now rests with Kent County Council. And if it is going to full council in December, then the public need to lobby their county member within which the division they sit, so that pressure is put on that county member to accede to the residents' wishes if the county council are going to proceed with the change at Oaken Wood. So procedurally, I think we need to just calm everything down a bit and look at what can be done, as opposed to what the borough council may or may not do at full council. Because I think it's a complete waste of time to take this issue to full council at the borough council, because the decision lies now with Kent County Council and the county members of Kent. Thank you.
I think one has to be careful about taking yes, it's quite literally true that in a cabinet system, the cabinet member or the cabinet collectively can make the decision and can disregard policy advice. That has to be said, but that is one of the reasons that the cabinet system did not survive in 2014, was that it had got into a pattern of ignoring advice and making decisions. And it is probably it is something. I'm not saying any particular decision. It may not be. It may be right or wrong for a cabinet member to disagree with a committee. Sometimes committees get things wrong. However, if it becomes a pattern, it can be a problem. And we have had a number of those issues recently. Now, it's not correct to say we can't do anything. You are correct, Councillor Webb, and others are correct, that we cannot technically respond. Well, we can't technically respond to a consultation that is closed. We can't send another consultation letter. It would just be impossible for the county council to actually consider it within its own processes, because the consultation is closed, and you can't take representations on that consultation after its closure unless an extension has already been agreed. And we did have an extension, and that was timed out. Now it has been timed out. It's only possible if in terms of Maidstone Borough Council's own procedure, if this were to be referred either to Cabinet or to full Council, to consider varying the recommendation, to ask the Council to consider making further representations to the County Council's Environment Committee in November, and or directly to the Cabinet member. We can do that. It is not outside of our power. That would be the only constitutionally possible way for this council to reconsider its position. Therefore, I would like to recommend that a motion for the purposes of debate, because that is literally the only practical proposition. We can't discuss reopening the consultation because it's finished. So I would propose that motion that we do refer this matter to full council for consideration of whether this council should make further representations to Kent County Council as this process continues, with particular reference to the meeting of the Environment Committee in November. Is that seconded? Councillor Jeffrey was first. I'll entertain discussion on that if members wish to speak for or against. Anyone else first, because you have spoken, and I'll come back to Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. I sort of don't really see the point in referring it to full council, because the decision has been made, as we've discussed. The horse has bolted, whatever the phrase is, and it sort of we'll just be talking about it again. And one question that did occur to me was that this council has a duty to cooperate with KCC's processes, and I just was wondering, I don't really understand why we would refer it to full council for us to discuss it again, when what has happened is the council has followed procedure and we have cooperated with KCC. At a later date we can discuss but I just don't see the point in referring this to full council. It's it's just extending the discussion that we don't have any power over.
Firstly, the duty to cooperate is particular to the making of local plans between authorities that have both local plan powers on both sides. So it's a slightly different situation. But Councillor Cooper, do you want to illuminate this particular point?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On the point of duty to cooperate, indeed, Kent County Council has a duty to cooperate with us in the same way that we've cooperated with them for our local plan. At some point, I'd like to think that a statement of common ground will be published between both authorities. So there is clearly ongoing dialogue which goes on at both officer and political level in relation to the formation of this Kent Minerals plan going forwards. So although we quite literally have missed the boat for this consultation, and unfortunately we probably missed the opportunity to strengthen our position, we still can and indeed will continue discussions with Kent County Council going forward. So I think it's a very powerful point that Councillor Cannon raises. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I will endorse the point that you made about whether we can or can't do something. It's an advisory committee. Clearly, the cabinet member can accept or reject a decision, but that's not to say that we don't have a call in, and that's the reason why we're here tonight. This is part of the makeup of the council, so we've got every right to be here to debate this. In terms of whether or not the decision is halfway through, three-quarters through, this is an agreement that was cross-party. I feel that some of the best decisions this council has made have been cross-party, and it was 7-2. So why wouldn't we be discussing this point of this call-in? I've been involved in registering ancient woodland with Natural England. I've actually been involved in 2 woodlands that are designated, and it's a very onerous process, and it's a very high bar, and it's not something to be taken lightly. We may be a third of the way through, 50% through at KCC, but I think that we should be expressing our view to KCC. The decisions on their local plan have yet to be completely resolved, so this will be informing debate. And should there be a judicial review, which quite often happens over these types of matters, we can at least have our viewpoint for that judicial view, which I think will be part of an evidence base, whether it be the local plan, a judicial review, or whatever it may be. So I don't think that we are at this point where we can't assess what's happened, and I think that what's happened is a shame. The fact that the committee had a view that they should go a certain way, and the cabinet members went completely against it.
Right, Councillor Gooch, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Chairman. The position of a councillor is extremely difficult. Yes, of course, it is our role to represent our residents. That's why they vote for us. That's why we are sitting here. As we all know, we also have another role, and that is to follow the law of the land. We have to do it with our local plan. I know for a fact that nobody in my area wanted any houses, but by George, we got about 600 minimum. I had to support that because if we didn't have a local plan, the developers would have had a field day. So there are the 2 halves, the 2 responsibilities of being a councillor. Climate change is happening. We had floods locally yesterday. I'm on the side of a hill, but we were still flooded. This council has argued with itself because we don't think we're going fast enough or focused enough to achieve net carbon output by a certain date. So we're well aware of the dangers of release of carbon, which is the very thing that would happen when you disturb ancient woodland soils. However, bear in mind, we were not being, during this Regulation 18 consultation by KCC, we were not being asked for support. We were being asked to raise any issues that we thought should be brought to the attention of the County Council if they include an extension of the time of Hermitage Quarry. Fortunately, in the first letter that went out, admittedly it was all very sweet and kissing, but it did actually highlight that we would need mitigation to replace the trees, to try and do something to mitigate the loss of amenity. We actually wrote it down, and that was the right thing to do. It's unfortunate that it wasn't strong enough, but really would KCC have taken any notice? They probably wouldn't. They've got a job to do. I know my residents don't want any more houses, and I tell you what, they don't want any more roads. And they don't want any more hard rock because they don't want the roads. Doesn't matter about the Tower of London or Canterbury Cathedral, because heritage sites are only 2%, so we won't worry about that. What I particularly worry about is the loss of carbon once those soils are disturbed. Interestingly, what KCC will have to worry about, because they won't be the final decider, this is a national issue, it is of national importance, and KCC will have to decide, would they be willing to import hard rock from abroad? You can't get good enough hard rock from dredging, so I understand. So it would have to be imported from abroad. How much carbon would that release? I don't think KCC have taken that into account. It's not our role to take that into account. We are too early in the process. So, and I would just add that I looked in the Constitution, and thanks to the support of our Democratic Services officers, there is nowhere in the Constitution that requires the Cabinet member to heed the advice of an advisory committee. Good point. What's the point of advisory committees? Couldn't agree more. I do wonder that myself. But we're looking at that. We're looking at it. We're not ignoring it. Should they be scrutiny committees as well as advisory committees? That is something this council will be looking at. But at this moment in time, we are faced as to whether or not to just let sleeping dogs lie just for now. What's done is done. There is another call for sites being carried out that we can still respond to, that we can still take into account the very strong feelings of our residents here, plus the issues that we've already raised, such as requiring mitigation. Or we can just sit tight and wait and have a big delegation. There are choices ahead of us, but please don't let's waste any more time. Just let this lie, and let's move on. And I really, despite all that, I cannot support the motion. Thank you for your time, letting me speak. Thank you.
I think it's a shame that we're at this position, but it's quite clear which way this is going, so I'm not going to take too many more speakers. Councillor Cleater.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate today, and I obviously see that representations need to be made to Kent County Council, so I hope the 4 Kent County councillors who are twin-hatted actually take those concerns back to Kent County Council. We've had a motion, I agree with it, I think we should vote on it. At the end of the day, for me, to sit here and have to admit what is the point of a policy advisory committee tells us we've got it all wrong and we need to review that. However, that doesn't mean we do nothing. And we can do nothing and fail, but at least we can look at ourselves in the mirror and say, at least we tried. And that is how I've been brought up all through my life. We need to show that as Maidstone Borough councillors, that we are there to represent the views. I've had representations from this. I've had representations from people who work at Maidstone Hospital. I've had representations from people who don't live near Oakenwood but understand the importance of it, because where's next? That's the issue around here. So I would say that we go with the motion, vote on it, whatever will be, and we take it from there, because at the end of the day we do have a voice, we should use it. People can choose to ignore it, that's their choice, but we have a voice. And last time I looked, when I got elected, that's what I was here to do, to give a voice to people. So I'm happy to support the motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're here considering the calling of letters of the 7th of September following that of the 9th of August, written in his official capacity by Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development on behalf of the Cabinet and Maidstone Borough Council. I also make these remarks in view of Appendix 3A in our papers, the cross-cutting issues and implications from page 37 of the August 7th meeting. As well as noting these aspects of due and proper process, as my friend says, I also recall the contextual remarks made by Council Leader Councillor Burton in this chamber before I was elected or selected to this committee. Councillor Burton made it very clear that his preference, and this is a bold vision, may I say, was that he would not be appointing a cabinet member or job description for biodiversity, climate change or the environment or such like. Rather, Councillor Burton held every member of his administration and all 55 councillors in Maidstone to be responsible for delivering these criteria, vital for the thriving of our place and our grandchildren. A grand vision for local democracy in action, and one he elaborated at the opening of the municipal year by not imposing a programme on this council, but enfranchising debate and scrutiny. Such was the understanding of the Policy Advisory Committee on September 7th. I won't rehearse what others have said already. The sum total of meaningful alteration to Councillor Cooper's letter drafted on the 7th of September changed the clause could cause harm to biodiversity to will cause harm to biodiversity. There continues to be mention of the need to preserve, but this phrase in both letters applies not to biodiversity or ecology, but to the County Council Minerals Extraction Plan. The Cabinet member's letter does well to support the constructive and cooperative working of borough and county councils, a motivation I applaud. But it is clear enough that the assumptions on which the existing KCC plan have been developed from are at least unexamined, or, worse, poorly understood. KCC Administration member Councillor Carey asserted last Thursday that the need for hard rock from Hermitage Lane was as a building material. This despite the fact that councillors in this chamber have published what Gallagher's admitted, that less than 1% of mining is for this use, a need that could readily be met from preserving existing quarry reserves. It seems news last week to Kent County Council councillors that the bulk is for roads and cement mixes. Might it be possible that the Hythe beds stretching from Hythe to Sevenoaks, where it's been historically mined, offer alternatives that are not overburdened by complex and valuable ecosystems developed and only minimally managed since the last ice age? KCC have belatedly issued a second call for sites, which rather indicates their lack of confidence in the single case at Oakenwood Hermitage Quarry. I understand that nomination does not hinge on landowners taking the initiative, despite what has been said. Might alternative rock be obtained even from Scotland or Norway, two examples we've heard advanced this evening? Think of the carbon cost of import, comes the cry. Well, frankly, I will take no lessons on this from a council that has paved the streets outside this building with granite sets obtained from China. There is no balance sheet that profitably sets biodiverse ecosystems against the import costs of raw materials. No such confusions existed for Tunbridge and Malling, whose officer letter of objection regarding the proposed heritage extension is far more robust in favour of life rather than limestone. But the question at issue here is that addressed by Councillor Burton in May. The voice of the people and the majority of councillors who met here earlier in the month has not been adequately heard. Their views are at odds with the impression given on page 37 of these papers, which assert that biodiversity and environmental sustainability is respected, and in some, that the report and letter stemming from it are said, and I quote, not to materially harm the Council's ability to achieve these objectives. On the contrary, these views all combine to question the assumptions on which the old KCC plan was made. It is not the job of this Council or its Cabinet to support that plan. Rather, it is the democratic will of these councillors that the objections now stated should be fully conveyed to Kent County Council, who, may I say, I hope will hear that our wish is to support the preservation of ancient riches that cannot be piled into an inert heap for our sustainable future. Be that as it may, I speak today that the response of Maidstone Borough Council to KCC is referred to the full Council for democratic consideration according to the scheme that you, Mr Chairman, have suggested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unless any members... Oh, sorry, Councillor Webb.
Yes, I hear what colleagues have said, but I come back to the core purpose of the County Council. The decision is now with the County Council. Residents and borough councillors can lobby and meet their county councillor to put pressure on them if the county council proceeds with this change. It's not unusual for any member of the county council to vote against the county council's wishes if enough residents put pressure on their county councillor to do so, because the residents are the people who vote for their county councillors as well as the borough councillors. So I am against this motion because time has passed, and I honestly believe that to send this to Maidstone Borough Council, full council, is a complete and utter waste of time. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey, and that will be the last contribution.
I will keep this brief. We have to be the voice of the people as representatives. I don't believe that that voice is being heard through this council to KCC. Clearly understand that we are putting in a representation as a significant body on this issue. This is an issue of national importance, and I really do think it needs full council debate, and I really hope that councillors around this room will allow that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. I think in certain quarters, emotions are running high. And in some ways, I think Councillor Jeffrey is right. This should be debated at full council. However, I don't think that the letter or the sending of the letter, which is why we're here, should be debated at full council. There is nothing to stop anyone, any councillor, from bringing a motion to full council, and we debate it there if we want to do that. That part, I could see why you would do it. Debating the letter and whether the letter was sent or whether it should be resent or changed, I'm sorry, the horse hasn't just bolted, it's in a different county. So let's be sensible and do what we can do. As Councillor Webb has said, lobby your KCC member, because that's where the ultimate decision will be made. I refuse to support the motion from Councillor English because he is referring to a letter that's passed. Excuse me, Councillor English, I think we've heard enough, thank you. Excuse me, I have not finished. So, I think the letter has gone. I thought we were actually having silence from the gallery. I'm sure that's what the chairman said, but there we are. The letter has gone, the debate is closed, and I will not support your motion, Councillor English.
I don't think, in that case, that you were actually listening to what I said, Councillor Blackmore. I very clearly said at the beginning that this motion was not rediscussed in the letter. The letter has gone. The consultation is closed. The motion was to consider further representations to Kent County Council join the process of the discussion on the minerals plan going forward. No mention of the letter that's gone in the past, whatever. It's quite possible, and you may well be right to disagree with that, but the motion was not in any way whatsoever talking about resending the letter that had already been sent or reopening that discussion, because as the Cabinet member quite correctly said, that discussion, that particular part of the discussion, is indeed closed. What is not closed is Kent County Council's internal decision-making process on the making of the minerals and the local plan, right? That's not finished. So what I was very clear about was that I was not proposing any discussion, any referral to full council of the original letter, but simply a discussion at full council as to whether we make further representations as a result of that process. Now, That it may well be something you still disagree with, but I believe that is a distinct, different proposition than the one you thought I'd propose. So I just make that point for clarification. Finally, I would say that whatever decision you make, please don't make it on the basis of, oh, we haven't got time to discuss this, because frankly, this is an important issue, and I would hate to think that we didn't make representations on something as important as this because we'd got bored and we thought that the procedure should run out and that we just haven't had time to discuss such an important issue. As I have spoken to the motion again, I will take one further comment on the other side if members want to make one, because I don't want to bias the debate too much in one direction by finishing. So if you wanted to. Sorry.
That makes it possible.
Yeah. Sorry, the officer quite rightly wanted to clarify what we were proposing. Did you want to add anything before we move to the vote, Olivia?
Thank you, Chairman. So members just wanted to summarise essentially the motion that's been put forward in that, sorry, excuse me, let me just find the wording, I thought I had it. So the original wording was to move that it be referred to full council, so by it the decision be referred to full council for consideration on whether further representation should be made to Kent County Council, with particular reference to the Environment Committee's report in November 2023. So just to clarify in terms of the procedure, that would be the committee referring the decision back to full council for their review, with the recommendation that actually alternative recommendations be made to another committee at Kent County Council. I just want to clarify that position, make sure that that's correct.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I'm really confused because the Democratic Service Officer has made it very clear it's referring the decision. The decision was the letter that was sent, but you said this had absolutely nothing to do with the letter that was sent. So I'm sorry, I'm very confused.
What I was suggesting was that instead of asking the council to send another letter in relation to this consultation, which is the original, which we can't do for obvious reasons, that we simply had a discussion whether we could make further representations during the process. That is, well, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to full council one way or the other, because if it's not referred from here, there will be a motion to council. So let's go to the vote. The only reason the original decision is referenced is because of constitutional point. You have to have a reference point from the call-in. It's as simple as that. It's not reissuing the letter or varying the letter. It's just that's constitutionally you have to have the departure point because that was the calling. It's as simple as that. However, I think members have made their positions clear, so I'm going to go to a vote. All those in favour of the motion as proposed?
6.
Those against?
7. It falls.
That motion falls, unfortunately, so it's academic, so we'll go to Plan B on that one, as far as I'm concerned. So, anyway, sorry? No. Does anyone wish to propose an alternative motion at this point because the motion has been defeated. Therefore, we have no motion on the table. Councillor Webb.
The vote has been taken. The vote has been lost. It is highly inappropriate for a chair of any committee to effectively stamp his foot and say, well, we haven't got the vote this time, but I'll take it somewhere else. That is not appropriate. And I have to say that should this happen again, I will be taking disciplinary processes out against you as the chairman. Thank you.
I was responding merely to the point that was made earlier by members on your side that a motion to full council could be put, and I'm simply saying that it probably will be put. I didn't say I'd be doing it, but I'm certain that it will happen.
Well, I think we'll have to agree to differ, Chairman, with your body language. Thank you.
I was merely saying from the point that you had raised, no, not you, but one of your colleagues had raised earlier that that the matter could be addressed by alternate methods. Sorry?
The statement that I have made still stands. Thank you.
Do members wish to make an alternative proposal? Because as the original motion has fallen, Councillor Goode.
Thank you. I propose that we go with option 1 to agree that no further action is required at this time.
Councillor Blackmore, are you second?
Indeed.
Given the tenor of the debate so far, I don't think there's any point debating that particular motion at this time, do you? Members of the committee?
Happy to go to the vote, Chairman.
I was just checking. I didn't want to trample on anyone's feelings. In that case, the motion has been proposed that no further action be taken at this time. Those in favour? Those against? There will be a short recess because there are significant numbers of the public here in case they wish to leave at this point. My apologies, had to take a phone call. Right, we'll recommence the meeting, please. So I move on to item 15, if you'd like to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, this is the motion that was presented to a previous council meeting. Council resolved to send the motion as amended to this committee, and it is for this committee to decide if and how it would like to take that forward. Thank you.
Okay. Apologies for the lengthy break there, but there were a lot of people needing to leave the building. We're now on item 15, rights of rivers. Councillor Jeffrey, would you like to address this matter?
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of scratching my head a little bit as to what to say at this point. Obviously, I proposed the motion at full council, and in effect, the point 3 was deleted. So we're looking at points 1 and 2 that the council acknowledges the global movement around rights of nature, and secondly, that we consider our interactions in the context of the 6 rights that are set out in that declaration. And that those 2 points were referred here for to see what we might want to do with that concept. If anything, I hope we do something with it. So what do I want? Ultimately, I want this council to take action to protect and enhance our rivers. I don't think there's any disagreement that our rivers are in an appalling state and need both the policy considerations in terms of planning and strategic planning to be far more river friendly. But also we want the council to be a bit more proactive. Secondly, I do want the council as a whole to recognise those 6 rights, and they're not some highfalutin set of issues. It's the right to flow, the fact that there's essential functions, the right to be free of pollution, and so forth. These are simple things that I'm sure we think should be enjoyed by our rivers. But third, and probably foremost in terms of what I would like us to suggest, and I don't know where that should be suggested to, and my suggestion is probably that this, if agreed, we add this to some of the comments that are likely to go to Cabinet, that the 6 rights are used as a framework for action by the Council and for policy development. We use it as a framework to deliver new policy which helps protect our rivers. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Chairman. Some things are for the Borough Council. We've just had, the previous item was for Kent County Council. This one I truly believe is for the Environment Agency. And what I would actually recommend is we have a robust letter to the Environment Agency detailing some of these rights, and we lend our support to it, because that's where I truly believe this belongs. I think there's an awful lot of work that's being done in connection with biodiversity by this council already. We've looked at our green spaces, etc. Okay, it's not the river, but I do feel that this doesn't really belong with us. I think it belongs with the Environment Agency, and that's what I would like to propose as a recommendation. And if anybody would be happy to support that, I'd be grateful.
Councillor Round, do you wish to? Are you seconding that, or do you wish to speak, or both?
I wish to second that motion, but at the same time, I would also like to add not just the Environment Agency, but Natural England as well, because of the rationale
that our rivers must also include our triple SIs?
Chairman, I'm happy to accept that alteration.
I can see that there is obviously some purpose in contacting the Environment Agency over some of those issues, although one would hope that they might hopefully this time be more responsive than they were to our water cycle review, where they have been spectacularly unhelpful, along with a number of other agencies. I would say that it is not entirely something outside of the Borough Council's remit, or indeed those partners we work with. There are a number of organisations which we partner with, and this has been brought up in the ongoing water cycle review, who so the list that has been mentioned is at least a dozen partner agencies too short. However, so that's one observation. The second observation is that there are some purposes that there are some of these issues that do fall more directly within the purview of the Borough Council, whether it's working by itself or whether it's working with other agencies. For example, if you take a very minor example, and you look at our function as a planning authority in the development management side, and you look at the planning application in and around the Roots garage, as was, and similar issues in terms of our own management of the not entirely unadjacent mill pond next to it, and also our own management of Moat Park and other facilities, nature reserves that we are in control of or we influence, other and some of the work that's been done in task forces. You're not unfamiliar with yourself, Councillor Blackmore, in the Martin and Yording area on the Bute and the Tees. There are things we can do as a borough council, so I would say that there is some merit in looking at what we can do, but what we don't need to do is repeat work that has been done elsewhere in the council as part of the water cycle review, because some of that work has already been done by the council and is ongoing. So I would say that a lot of these points in relation to, say, the River Len or the River Lill or other smaller rivers in Maidstone are indeed being picked up by this council. So it's not true that we can't do them. It's just a question. I don't think it's necessarily brilliant to do them in two separate places within the council. So having said that, the list that Councillor Round and yourself probably needs extending with people like the Upper Medway and Lower Medway Internal Drainage Board and so on and so forth. And also, we probably need to make sure that we're cross-referencing this to the work that's already going on the water cycle, to make sure that the council does pick up its own area of responsibility. That's more a cross-reference, a footnote, if you like, rather than a particular part of the motion. But if it were possible to expand that list of people that we're aiming to work with, and also make sure it was cross-referenced to make sure we pick up our own responsibilities as a council in the water cycle review, that would probably be better. And I'll ask the movers to give that consideration.
Interesting and useful comments. I do support the idea that we can write to Environment Agency and Natural England. I also support Councillor English's comments that it would be good if we could ask and cross-reference these issues with the work that's going on, and also extend the list of people we write to. So with those additional bits, I'd be happy to support that motion if it was extended in the way that was just described.
When you say additional bits, what do we mean by additional bits?
I was just suggesting that we slightly extend the list of people that we are referring to, because within the borough we have the Upper and Medway Internal Drainage Board that have been involved very usefully in discussions, and we have the actual South East Rivers Trust, which I would like to just add to the list, but you know, that's not going to undermine what you're saying. And also I just wanted to cross-reference this so that the parts that are the borough's responsibility are just picked up in the work that that's just a footnote, making sure that we are actually taking note of this within the water cycle review.
Yes, I think that is sensible up to a point, as long as we don't start getting silly and writing to his world and her wife about it. Oh, excuse me. However, if I can just finish, if you don't mind, Chairman, again, you do like interrupting. I do think that we also have to look at outside bodies as well, because with some organisations we do have representatives on outside bodies, so I think it is worth mentioning that if that is of a particular interest to a particular member, then why not join as an outside body representative? Because often we find it really hard to find a councillor who will serve on the outside bodies, so therefore don't talk about it, do it.
I'm sorry, Councillor Blackmore, I had mentioned that and completely forgot to put it in the actual formal wording. Thank you very much for reminding me. I do appreciate it. Seems to be fairly unanimous. So, Councillor Clark.
I just wanted to make a point that we've got, in our policies, we have landscapes of local value. But by their definition, waterways are of local value, and it seems to me to be something that we could have as a thread in our policies going forward, that in the same way we look at landscapes and we consider planning around those landscapes and how it's valued by the borough, we could look at our waterways and look at how that can be part of our determination in housing allocations.
That is very true. One of the things that we are hoping to pick up in the and has been picked up in the water cycle review, and this is being discussed at Cabinet tomorrow. The response to this was in relation to the design and sustainability DPD. If we agree this tonight, it just simply solidifies what we're going to be saying in that DPD, and would be useful to be able to go to Cabinet and say that tomorrow.
Thank you, Chairman. I was thinking of the green and blue strategy. I hope I'm not too far out of date, and I'm wondering if it could be linked in with that. I seem to recall, though, can you just reassure me? Because when this was first discussed at full council at length, I know that Councillor Howard was quite keen to try to focus the whole discussion on the River Len, on the basis that it really is a Maidstone river. You know, it's not got lots of tributaries. Pardon my ignorance, this is not my forte, but I rather listened to what he said about the River Len, and I would not like to lose what his advocacy was on that particular point.
Councillor Cooch, it was intended to have the sort of debate simultaneously, and as I referred to a petition earlier on, which is now actually going to the Cabinet, it was intended to bring that here, but because it refers to Cabinet action, it has to go directly to the Cabinet. So I think it's fair to say the intention is we would have two motions, processes that do not contradict each other, but hopefully support each other. Hope, but that's over to Cabinet tomorrow to make those decisions. But hopefully, if we're sending a signal to them tonight of the direction, the flow, shall we say, of where we're going, that will assist their thinking tomorrow, and hopefully we will move forward with that. Anyone else in other? Unless there is, I'll put the motion to the vote. The officer want to repeat that?
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to check the wording as put forward, given the amendments as well. So I've got that a letter be sent to the Environment Agency, Natural England, Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board and South East Rivers Trust, detailing the rights of rivers as contained within the motion with the committee's support, and that the contents of the letter be cross-referenced with the Council's ongoing work relating to the topic.
And I think it was a further reference to encourage members of the council to get appropriately involved in outside bodies with particular responsibilities in this field, or something like that.
And just one other thing. Once we've taken the vote, if it's unanimous, can we say that there was unanimous support, please, in the letter?
All those in favour then? Thank you, members. That's very, very good of you. Now, I think we move back to the committee work programme. Oh, Councillor Clark.
I was just registering to speak with that part after you've introduced it, Chairman.
Sorry? Yes, please, would you like?
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, following the Chairman's instruction at the last meeting that the committee work programme would be reviewed, the committee work programme attached has been supported by a detailed list of agenda items for the remaining meetings of the municipal year. So this takes into account the changes due to having to pause the water management cycle review due to a lack of stakeholder engagement, and the shift of the enforcement review from this meeting to the next in October 2023 due to the size of this evening's agenda. So the agenda items only show what's scheduled for each committee meeting, but it doesn't reflect the work required to support each item, such as meetings of working groups, research, discussions with officers and stakeholders. So the work programme, I believe, is currently full, and we'd just like to put to the committee for them to review the contents and make sure that this is make sure it's deliverable. Thank you.
Any questions or comments, Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to bring an item to the work agenda, or the work programme. I feel we should be bringing the Maidstone's integrated transport strategy to this committee. Most members will know that the current ITS that's going through JTB, which is an advisory committee, it was basically part of our adopted local plan. It started much earlier than the 2017 adoption of the local plan, and we're now in the local plan review. And for the most part, those junctions that were put forward in the original local plan adopted in 2017 are still dragging on. And we're now in the local plan update, but obviously KCC doesn't necessarily have the bandwidth to start a whole new program of mitigation when we've still got these junctions dragging on. I understand that KCC is the Highways Authority, and as such, KCC are responsible for the delivery and the staffing, the resourcing. Well, actually, resourcing comes from the LEP for much of this, for this work, and the local enterprise partnership, and a significant amount comes from developer contribution. But regardless of who is the Highways Authority, we own the local plan. We're the borough, we determine the local plan, we say what mitigation there should be with the housing, and I feel as a borough we have failed to drive forward our integrated transport strategy, and it's not getting us anywhere to time after time after time say there's little we can do about it, it's KCC that's the Highways Authority. We really need to take ownership of our own local plan, and that includes this ITS. We've got a number of decisions that have happened at the JTB which are advisory, and in the same way that we talked about this earlier today, that advisory committee makes decisions or makes recommendations, and quite often they are people or the cabinet member at KCC chooses not to go forward with that, and that's not always in Maidstone's interest. That's part of the sort of topic that I would like to see debated when this comes to us. I'll give an example of this. Hall Road, this is Maidstone's integrated transport strategy. We've got the money from the LEP, we've got developed contribution to deliver it, and we found that all of a sudden one of the added junctions was Hall Road in Tunbridge and Malling. So money, a significant amount of money, was moved across to work on the Hall Road junction. At Joint Transport Board, I made the proposal that we should not hemorrhage that money from Maidstone's integrated transport strategy to Tunbridge and Malling, when the Fountain Junction, for instance, was going unfunded, and there wasn't even a plan to move it forward. Now, we got cross-party agreement that we did not want to spend Maidstone's money, or we didn't want to give Maidstone's money for traffic mitigation to Tunbridge and Malling. However, as time went on and JTBs were cancelled and there wasn't enough business on the agenda, we learned that KCC had put Hall Road back on the agenda, and it's still there now, and we're still trying to work out what we can ever do with the Fountain Junction. When you look at things like this, in my area, the Wheatsheaf Junction, it went to consultation in end of 2019, early 2020. The scale of that junction was significant compared to the scale of the junction that's currently being discussed. The KCC bought the Wheatsheaf pub. They were going to knock it down, build a.
Could you bring your remarks to a conclusion, please, Councillor Clark?
Okay. Well, I can continue, but I want to come back to another decision, which is the closure of Cranbourne Avenue. That was another point that was taken out of our adopted local plan in 2017. We voted on it at strategic planning and at JTB. Cross-party members felt that should not be in our local plan, and it's come back again, and you can see the level of controversy.
Councillor Clark, if you could come to a conclusion.
So I'm proposing that with the points that I've raised and others, this should be on our work programme, and I think all members should be involved because it's something that spans the borough.
I just check with the Democratic Services Officer whether we have any indication of when the ITS will be coming to us, because it should, in theory, be coming at some point anyway, but or to Pied.
I'm proposing that we put it on.
Yeah, no, I just want to find out whether there is actually any timeline at the moment or not.
So, thank you, Chairman. So there isn't a specific timeline associated with the ITS at the moment, but it was included in one of the Pied Pack reports in early September. The efforts would be made essentially to sort of look at reviewing the ITS. I don't want to sort of put words on that, so if you'd prefer, I'm happy to get the wording from the report if you would prefer that, just to read that out to the committee.
So hypothetically, if we did want to have an early discussion on what would be in the ITS or the parameters for the review of it, we could have a discussion in October or November, which would be meaningful. I'm not saying that we should, I'm just saying we could.
I think we've got quite a heavy agenda, haven't we, Chairman, for October?
I was not saying we should, I'm just trying to clarify where we could and couldn't. Councillor Round?
I remember when we had our first overview and scrutiny committee, we looked at potential agenda items and we squeezed it down because we said we simply haven't got time, energy, stamina and the ability to take on any more issues. I mean, there were several really good issues that we had on that list that we had to knock out because we had a very ambitious work programme.
The only reason it's even being discussed at this moment is because we have a temporary hiatus with the water cycle review in terms of the non-response of a considerable number of people. Councillor
Can we just be careful, Chairman, because we also have to think about the democratic support officers, because without meaning to be rude, it's very easy for us to say, oh, we should do this, we should do that, but we do have to look at the support that they give us, and I think to overload them is wrong. So I understand what Councillor Clark is saying. The item is already going to PIED PAC. And by all means, come along on the night, Councillor Clark, and make your representation to the committee, because that's what it's there for.
I was merely trying to ascertain what the timeline actually was at the moment, because if the report is going to PAC at a certain time, then that certain actions might follow, and if it isn't, certain other actions might follow. And obviously, given that we may not be able to take the water cycle review forward as quickly as possible, then, or even for some time, then the situation has changed somewhat since our previous discussion. Any further comments on where we are at the moment? Would you like to? We do need to decide where we're going with the water cycle review in the immediate future. I do want to get this completed, but so there's our only course of, well, there's two courses of action at the moment. One is just to simply try again to get the engagement, but if we can't get the engagement and the water cycle review is unfortunately going to have to come to an end at that point, other than embarrassing the people who haven't responded, I do think we should reconsider a number of points, including Councillor Clark's, because clearly if that review, which is quite labour intensive, does not go forward any further, then we are in a different situation and we should reconsider what we're doing. Councillor Thompson.
In support of Councillor Round, I would have to say that I think that the next items we are expecting on our already agreed agenda for the rest of the year, it should be our priority.
I agree. I'm just saying that clearly if it does turn out that we aren't able to do that, then it will come back for further consideration, obviously, because we would be in a different ball game. Councillor Webb.
Yes, I'm pleased to be able to say, Chair, I agree with you. And at the time in the future when any item cannot proceed on our current agenda, then by all means let's bring something back in.
So I think that's where we are at the moment. We will try to make further efforts to try and progress the water cycle review. If we do not make further efforts, then we will be changing the agenda. I'm not saying it will be that change, but we will be reviewing at the next meeting the work programme to replace items, because we cannot simply sit around hoping that they will progress. So at the October meeting, when we are more informed about this, we will potentially be revising what we're doing. That agree? Thank you, members. Sorry, Councillor Clark. I will let you come back, as that was my fault.
I'll bring it back next meeting, Chairman.
We move on to medium-term financial strategy, and I do apologise to Councillor Perry and Mr Green for keeping both of them here so long. I hope they enjoyed it and haven't been too bored. Over to you, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Well, it was a fascinating debate, actually, so I was very interested in it. Now we come back to what I would call the meat of what we do in this council, because the medium-term financial strategy is the key to everything, because without it, we don't do any of our services, basically. So it is incredibly important. This paper sets out the basic financial strategy for basically starting with 24-25 and onwards. Now, let me make a statement straight away. We have a statutory requirement to produce a balanced budget. That is incredibly important. And it all really starts from there. So this year, we took the view that we would address the budget much earlier than we normally do. And I think this is extremely important because we need to look at these figures. Now, from the point of view of this current year, 23-24, I think we're going to, looking ahead, and it's always quite difficult looking ahead, but I think we are looking at a small deficit of about of £250,000. I turn to Mark here, but around about £250,000, which I think we can recover through what we carry forward through to next year. So when we're looking at 24-25, I believe that we can produce a balanced budget. And this paper sets out most of the reasons for doing that. And we are, in that sense, in a very strong position. But there are two key assumptions that I want to emphasize in producing what we believe will be a balanced budget. The first one is that council tax will need to increase to the referendum limit. Now, in recent years, we've done that at any rate, but I believe that is the right position to be in because the financial uncertainty, and if you look at the risk analysis in the paper, you'll see that financial uncertainty is still top of the league in terms of the high risk. There are other risk factors as well, but that's an extremely important one. The second one is that other income, and we do have a significant earnings in other income, will in general increase by 5%. That doesn't mean that individual fees and charges all will go up by 5%. Some will, some may not, some might even reduce. But overall, the income generated from other income would increase by 5%. Now, it should be noted here also that the financial settlement from the government, we don't really get that until traditionally until December in any 1 year. So we can't absolutely finalise things. And fees and charges we will not be finalising until the end of the year. And the capital framework budget that you'll see in the paper can't be finalised really until we know the financial settlement from the government. So that will probably come in early 2024. Now, just on a general point here, and it's something I personally feel very, very strongly about, that we as a council are financially in a very good position. And I want to maintain that because without being in a good position, we can't provide the services. We can't, for instance, I was always told when I first became a councillor, I'm sorry to bring up Bingate, but I'm going to, if you don't empty your bins, you're in trouble. We need a good waste collection service. We need other services. Planning needs to be, planning enforcement needs to be followed up and resourced. These are all important services that we provide as a council, and it is important that we have a healthy, and we are in a healthy financial position to do so. We have a very good balance sheet, a healthy balance sheet, supported by what in my view are very good reserves, and those reserves are important. We have about 19.8 million reserves we're looking at in allocated reserves. They were very specific reserves, and we have another 11.6 million in what I would call general reserves. And those general reserves work out at about 21-22% of our overall costs. So that is quite a reasonable position to be in, but it also means we have a very healthy balance sheet, and for me that is very, very important. Now, so I've said we can recover. I believe we can have a balanced budget for 24-25. That's what we're planning to have, and I believe we can make it. You'll see the savings that we need to get that balanced budget. We'll need to make savings around about £900,000. That you can see set out clearly in, I think it's pages 107 to 109 of the working paper, sets out how we will make those savings. And some of them are basically improving efficiency and certain areas where we've reviewed how we do things. And I think overall, and we can make those savings. I absolutely do that. Where we've got to be very, very careful, and here is a big however, is that from 24, 25, 26 onwards, the position doesn't look nearly so good. Now, if you turn to, I think it's on page, I forget the page now, but it's table 1 in the paper on the MTFS, you'll see a table that sets out the positions from 24, 25 onwards for the 5 years. And you'll see that though we've got a deficit of 900k in 24, 25, which we believe we can recover, from you go to 25, 26, you'll see a deficit of 4.5 million. That's a huge jump. And that is something we are going to have to look at and address, and maybe Mark will have a bit more to say on that. But that is something seriously. But in the short term, I believe we will have a balanced budget for 24, 25, and that for me is incredibly important. One other thing I just wanted to also say is that the Corporate Services Pack reviewed the MTFS, and I just wanted to say something about that because I personally support the pack and I want to work closely with them. I don't believe in wanting to go against the pack. I know in the cabinet system sometimes you might have to do that, but for me, the advisory, it is advisory committee, but it's for me a very important one because their advice is very, very important. Now they reviewed this and they made a couple of key decisions, which is quite interesting, I think. They approved the strategy, the general strategy, the approach we're taking. And also they approved the savings as listed, except they had 2 exceptions to it. And they were both tied in with the biodiversity climate change area, where they actually, we wanted to actually increase the costs rather than reduce. They suggested that this be further reviewed and be accompanied with a review of the climate change biodiversity action plan that does need, and I think Councillor Gooch raised this earlier in earlier discussion, it's very, very important. It's incredibly important. And so I actually support that suggestion by the PAC. I think that's a good one. But this obviously will be discussed Cabinet tomorrow. I think there is an argument actually for increasing some of the costs on the biodiversity climate change, particularly bringing in extra staff to review the sort of savings that I think were outlined at Council. And I think Councillor Jeffrey, you emphasised this, we can make savings in decarbonising our buildings, for instance, and these are issues that I think maybe we could make a contribution there. So it could be a net gain for us, even though we might be increasing by 1 extra person. But that is for further review. So I understand where the PAC was coming from, and I think it was quite a very wise decision. So they're the main points I wanted to say. Just to recap, I believe we can have a balanced budget. I do believe we can have a balanced budget for 24-25. We've got to seriously look at the future, clearly, because that is going to be pretty much more challenging. But we do have a strong balance sheet, and I really think that is incredibly important. I'll leave it there, and if you want to, obviously I've got Mark with me. If we want to go into any questions, then please raise them. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Well, thank you, Councillor Perry. That was a very full and quite helpful introduction. Can I just ask whether Mr. Green wishes to add any initial remarks at this point, and then I will take questions.
Nothing to add to that.
Case, Councillor Round, you were narrowly first, followed by... I've taken you first. Councillor Round. And Richard, then Councillor Cleaton, Councillor Conyard, Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes, I would like to say thank you very much, Mr. Green, and indeed the Cabinet member for presenting what must be a pretty tough job this year. I mean, to have made certain reductions successfully without adverse effect on service looks to me as if a good job has been done, and those savings are significant whilst you have managed to balance the books, and I think that is incredibly wonderful when you consider what our friends up the road have failed to achieve. I also think it's particularly sad that we might finish up with a bit of a deficit. And it's very difficult in this day and age to really predict with a great deal of accuracy. But can I ask, do we think that is a reasonable estimate, or could things get more seriously worse?
Yeah, if you'd like me to take that.
Mr. Green or Councillor Perry, whichever.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Councillor Round. When you're referring to the deficit, are you referring to the deficit for this year? Yeah, I mean, the thing that is driving that is the number of households in temporary accommodation, which has shot up. It's now nearly 250 from around 100 a couple of years ago. And I mean, there is a risk there that it could get still worse. A number of things that we're doing to mitigate that. As you know, we're buying property on the open market to accommodate homeless households, but that won't be enough in itself to deal with the increase that we've got. So it's something that we're looking at very closely and working on, but I have to say that projected deficit of £250,000, I mean, we honestly don't know at this stage what the position will be by the end of the year. There is a risk it could be more than that.
I'm afraid that Mr. Green's given me the answer I feared you were going to give, because I fear that that's where the greatest pressure is going to lie, and that's not necessarily of our making. Again, we're back into a situation where other people may force us into that situation, or other circumstances may happen. So, if and when there is a potential problem, what are we doing to ensure that that won't happen? I mean, it's very difficult to predict that, but I mean, do we have some wiggle room? Do we have some comfort space?
I think that the answer comes in two parts. First of all, this is absolutely a top priority for particularly William Cornwall as the relevant director and John Littlemore as the head of service, and they're looking at all the things that they can do to mitigate the problem. The other thing that we can do across the council is to look at where we can save money in year to offset that overspend. Now, obviously, everyone hopes that can be done without an impact on services, but ultimately there are measures that we may have to take, for example, not filling staff vacancies if the overspend continues to grow.
Thank you. I think that's a fairly full answer. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, just to add to what Mark has said, if you look at the first quarter, and it's not in the main paper, but if you look at the first quarter, we've got an overspend of about 440,000. So it's actually, our long-term prediction for 23-24 is it will come down. But it is temporary accommodation, clearly, but there are pluses as well. For instance, investment income is higher because of better interest rates. And of course, the slippage in borrowing, that affects the provision that we make as well. So there are pluses here as well for 23-24. So overall, I think it's a reasonable prediction. No one's perfect, and you know, forecasting is an art as well as a science. And as a classicist myself, I'm on the art side of this a little bit more. So I think it's a very good projection as best we've got at the moment, but we will be looking at it very closely. Thank you.
Thank you. think anyone who makes predictions about what the government will do about local government funding is a brave man or woman. Councillor Conyard.
Hi, just a very quick question. Given the opening remarks about that we very sensibly started early with this, and also there is the government funding which we will hear about later this year, from reviewing this document in various packs, the feeling has been that this is not our final bite at the cherry, and as and when further figures become available, it will be revisited. Is my understanding correct there?
These represent the revenue budget proposals that will go into the budget that's finally presented to Cabinet in February next year. What we'll also be presenting to the Corporate Services Pack and to Cabinet in January is the capital budget proposals. Now, it's within the remit of this committee to look at all budget proposals. So yes, we would bring the capital budget proposals back to you in January.
My question, Mark, is again around Loch Meadow. We've got another tenant moving out on Monday, I believe, and it happens to be the one that's the award-winning place there. So we've lost the pub. I mean, Frankie and Benny's wasn't much of a loss, I'll be quite honest. I've eaten there. But my concern is I've spoken to a lot of the stall holders there, and they're really concerned about footfall and that, and we don't want Loch Meadow to be a white elephant. But that's my real concern, because obviously we've made certain projections in the budget that we will be getting this income, but really, you know, what impact will that have? Because once people start going, there's always an underlying thread. So that's my concern at the moment, is, you know, we generate a lot of income from that, and how are we going to manage it? And it's really sad because they're going to Rochester, I believe. So it's, you know, quite sad really. So that'll leave the cinema and the bit upstairs, but we need to get more footfall there. There's a whole conversation about whether things are in the right place and that, but my concern here is what impact any loss of income is going to have on the budget, because obviously that's where we make our money.
Yeah, there's a number of things to say in response to that, Councillor Cleater, and yeah, we're obviously sorry to lose a really good tenant. First of all, Love Food at Loch Meadow is, in a way, it's kind of the icing on the cake at Loch Meadow. It's not the major revenue generator. We've got tenants who are on long-term leases generating significant income for the council in the shape of Odeon, Hollywood Bowl, Gravity. We've now got the Loch Meadow Health Club, which is doing really well. So there will be turnover of tenants at Love Food. It's the nature of the place. We've got people who are waiting to come in. So it's a pity losing that tenant, but it's certainly not the end of the world. And as you know, we're doing a whole lot of things to bring people into Loch Meadow, a lot of events taking place there. We're now part of the Business Improvement District that's expanded to include Loch Meadow now, so that means that we benefit from things like the Christmas lights that the bid provides. So lots of things that we're doing to improve footfall, and going back to the basic point, no, it's not going to have a significant difference to the overall revenue from Loch Meadow having that one tenant going.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. I think Councillor Jeffrey was next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points and 2 questions. Councillor Round said some of this is not of our making, and clearly I agree with him. some of it is not of our making, and I think it's worth remembering that some of that future deficit concern is a result of decisions made, political decisions made by the national government. I am concerned that things like the park and ride looks like the Allington Park and Ride looks like it's being given its final final moments before it's completely removed, and that always the removal of the park and ride does again feel like something that we should have avoided. We do need more buses and fewer cars, and I really would ask that the Cabinet reflects on whether or not there is any possible way of bringing back park and ride. I believe there is. I'm not convinced we're going to see it quickly. But whilst that's being removed, what we saw last year was a freezing of car parking charges within the town. So in effect, we're subsidising drivers whilst cutting buses. That feels fundamentally wrong in this age of climate change. So I think there's 2 points there I'd like you to reflect on. I've got 2 questions. Firstly, there's a bunch of savings here that some of them are straightforward and I'm comfortable with, others that I'm really not comfortable with at all, and I don't see detail enough to comment on them. So my first question is, will any of these schemes be presented to any committee in more detail for further discussion, or will they just happen? No matter what the consequences. And second question is, how many, we heard Councillor Cooper talking about jobs earlier today, and I would like to know how many posts will be lost as a result of this, the savings being proposed.
Let me ask, I'm going to ask you all a question tonight. How many of you came in here by bus? Not one of you. Well, I did. So I know all about bus travel. And the problem with bus travel, as we all know, is it is underutilised, and quite frankly, the solutions to it would be to have a massive investment, which in the short term I don't think is realistic. With due respect, it's not. You can talk it, it sounds great, but like a lot of these things, people say, oh, I love this thing, but they don't actually use it themselves. I do. I'm a bus user because I can't drive. But I like to see more buses. But the reality is, the realistic position is, you're not going to be able to have that because it costs a lot of money. Now, I remember Park and Ride. It had a huge subsidy from this council, a huge subsidy. And it wasn't actually very well utilised. It's, again, it's something people make a big thing about. They say, oh, we must have Park and Ride. But do they use it? No. The only people who use it, and the only time it was ever busy, was in the mornings when people were using it to come to work. And they could have easily gone on other buses, quite frankly. So I'm not, the Park and Ride argument, I hear what you say, but I'm not over impressed with it, because the reality is that huge subsidy that we put in would have to come out of somewhere else in the budget. And you can tell me where you would like to make those savings, because that would be very significant. What we did try and do is put the Park and Ride onto a commercial basis with the personal bus operators, and that, but obviously that it was something that I'm not sure has been hugely successful. But nevertheless, I would like to see more buses, but it requires a subsidy, it requires huge investment, and that is something I don't think in the short term is realistic. As for car parking charges, well, it's not about subsidising drivers. I say it's about subsidising the town, because I want to encourage people to come in here and not go to Blue Water. And you do that by encouraging people to use the facilities in this town. And that's what that's all about. So you may make the argument, Councillor Jeffrey, I'll make it the other way. And it's an interesting debate. I would agree with you. Thank you. I don't ask if you've got anything else we want to add to that.
Mr. Green's got something.
Yeah, just to deal with the other questions that you raised, Councillor Jeffrey. So far as scrutiny by members is concerned, these proposals have been to all the packs, and the members had the opportunity then to ask more detailed questions on all the individual savings proposals, but I'd be happy to answer specific questions that you may have on them. And on impact on staffing, none of these proposals have an impact on staffing, so we won't see any redundancies as a result of these proposals.
Sorry, that wasn't quite what I asked. I asked how many posts will be removed rather than jobs lost. I'm assuming some of the posts will be removed as a result of this, and there'll be reorganisation, so I was interested in how many posts might be coming out.
No, there won't be any posts removed as a result of these specific proposals.
Just an observation on the park and ride issue. Am I right in saying that essentially this is costs that would not necessarily affect the availability of the site were park and ride theoretically being reinstalled?
No, because the site remains within the council's ownership, and it remains for the council to decide how that site is used in the future.
So it's basically a short-term administrative saving and would not have no impact on whether or not the site could in theory come back into use. I just wanted to clarify that. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Either Councillor or Mr. Green, I noticed that emergency planning on page 62 is put down as a proposed partnership. Certainly, thank you. No, not at all. On page 62, I see that emergency planning is put down as a £20,000 saving with a proposed partnership with an unnamed nearby authority. On the previous page, sorry, I should have done this in the opposite order, transferring risk management to emergency planning after manager has left, £29,000 saving. And I reflect on the conversation that we had last week about the potential new posts for biodiversity and climate change. Councillor Gooch has noted flooding today in your neighbourhood. Like you, I live on the side of a hill and pray to avoid this. I had to help my parents in Yalding some years ago when Nicholas Witchell came to visit the town with his television cameras. I'm well aware of the past history, and as Councillor Rand points out, we don't know what the future holds for us in many respects. That's why it's called risk planning. I wonder, against that background, whether or not those savings of £49,000 that you have earmarked here may be unwise savings, and indeed whether we have insulated the biodiversity climate change planning from the emergency planning. So this is an open-minded question on my part. I would like to know whether there is thinking about either the siloing or potential combination of those categories, and what the thinking is in terms of experience in Maidstone, be it from flooding or otherwise, as to whether saving £49,000 now is a good saving, or whether we should in fact be reinvesting that 49,000, say, in beefing up our emergency planning. I don't know exactly from these details precisely what the emergency planning looks like, so I'm interested in the broader reflection on whether the saving is wise or not, and whether the thinking behind it is broad enough. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. The savings that you mentioned arise from the fact that we have a well-resourced emergency planning section within the council, and specifically on the emergency planning side, the kind of response that's needed to flooding or any of those kind of events. First of all, it depends on having a good emergency planning manager, which we do have to set up all the systems, but it's also a council-wide effort, because what the emergency planning manager has is a rota of people who are on call. She has instant liaison officers who she can call out if there's an emergency. So you need to look beyond just these budgets to see the capacity of the council to deal with emergencies. And I mean, it has to be tested, but I believe we have the resources across the council to respond. It doesn't depend just on that one person or the 4 people in her team to make that happen. So I'm confident that these savings won't affect our ability to respond to emergencies or deal with risk.
On the other £20,000 proposed partnership saving, it actually looks, reading that we're actually not having a staffing reduction at all, but actually an improved delivery of staffing there. So that's the sort of saving I like to see, where you actually save money and actually get more input. Councillor Webb.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I do note the savings that are proposed within the document, and I have to say what I will now say is I note those savings because we're very early on in this financial year, and I think it's prudent to make room for savings if we have if the budget is likely to go overspent. So I'll reserve judgment for later on, if that's okay. Just to pick up one point Councillor Jeffrey made about the buses and the to bring back the buses. Sorry, what? Park and ride. That's it. I was part of the former committee which recommended that the park and ride was shut down. And the single reason in my mind that we shut that down was because on average, each person sitting on that bus cost £60 to the council. And it was a massive debt to the council every time that bus run. So I'll just add that point to you for your information. Thank you.
Members, there is doubtless a lot to be said about park and ride for and against in future discussions, but this is the medium-term financial strategy. The only issue here returns to the park and ride is a short-term administrative saving which does not impact particularly on the future of the park and ride, and is at least partly related to the fact that we no longer have car parking being charged there and therefore we don't have to pay business rates on that, which is, frankly, that's just a saving that it doesn't impact on whether or not we reintroduce park and ride, which is a debate for another time. Another debate which we will need to have in due course is the impact of fees and charges on this. We have had some news, I understand, on the planning fee front, which is, whilst not as good as it could have been, is considerably better than it might have been, if you like. So in that will have a significant impact on our development control section, a positive one. I would observe that, although I'm not necessarily saying that we should pick up, go above the recommended 5% average for fees and charges, it might be that, in certain contexts, the planning fee increase will be significantly above 5%, so the average might creep up above 5% without us actually having to do much in terms of actually increasing the charges we're responsible for. But I would like to say that we should look at relatively minor changes in and around parking charges if we possibly can, because we have a situation where we might actually be able to increase the number of people who use car parks at night if the fee were lower. and there are two ways of increasing parking income. One is to put the price up and hope the demand remains the same, which it may well do if the increase is at or below inflation. The other is to actually generate additional income by increasing the number of people who use it. And if we are going to continue to have growth in the town centre in terms of housing, a significant number of those people do not have access to residents per parking permits. So we should be considering, from a purely revenue point of view, the maximisation of the council's income from those people, plus that helps the residents. And I suspect that if we were able to look at that, we might actually end up helping those residents and getting additional income. So I will be returning to that discussion, but I do think it's something we should be looking at as a council. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Gooch.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Chairman. I was very interested to hear what you were saying just now about car parking charges and how we could possibly increase that. And I do think that's a valid point, so I'm actually supporting what you've just said. I have to say that as a member of the Corporate Services PAC, I've always looked carefully at the figures, and I have always thanked you consistently, certainly Councillor Perry and Mr. Green, on the excellent way that I consider that the council's finances are run. I think you continue to do an excellent job, and I thank you for that. My only concern is this, I'm so sorry, fees and charges. I know you have said some might be a lot more, some might be a lot less, and that's how it should average out. But that's where I think we could have a weak point, because I'm really, as you rightly point out, the increase in temporary accommodation and the necessity as we invest in more house purchases, we've got to service those house purchases, haven't we? And so on one hand, I think, yes, you're doing it right, but don't let's be too optimistic, because secretly I am a bit worried. And of course, we don't know what next year holds with a different government, and all sorts of things can go all sorts of ways. So I really hope that we can retain our ability to manage it as best that we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that concludes the questions and remarks from members of the committee. I don't think we have any particular recommendations other than to note the report, although I would say that I would hope that you would, as Cabinet Member, bear in mind some of the comments I just made about fees and charges relating to car parking, but I don't want to make that a formal recommendation at this time. The formal recommendation is what's on the papers. It's in two parts: that the draft medium-term financial strategy for 24-25 be set as to 28-29 as set out in Appendix A be approved, and that the budget proposals in Appendix B be approved. I don't think that's particularly controversial. Those in favour? Those against? More controversial than I thought, obviously. Abstentions? That recommendation is passed, although by not quite as large a margin as I expected from the debate. Right, we move on. Move on to the final item of this particular meeting. Again, I must apologise to Councillor Parfitt-Reid for a very long wait, and to Mr. James. Over to you, Councillor Parfitt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It has been a very interesting evening, and I've listened with interest to everything that's been said, especially, you know, the things outside my portfolio. I would just like to comment on a couple of comments that have been made from this committee about what is the point of the pack. And, you know, I can only speak obviously from personally as a cabinet member, but I found them hugely useful. And I can't think of any occasion in the 18 months that I've been in the cabinet that I've been to a pack and not taken the advice of the pack or added that into reports or recommendations, or indeed used it as an opportunity to pass on information to councillors in the wider context. And I'm pretty certain I would speak for the rest of the cabinet with those words and things. And I know obviously with the situation with the quarry, it's a highly emotive and very contentious issue, and it might feel that we don't listen, but really we do, and that's why we're sat here today. So I just wanted to just say that, and I don't want you to feel that we don't listen or I don't listen. Oh, my computer's closed itself because I've twittered on too long. Right. The community wardens. The report provides a summary of the proposed changes and the proposed response to be given on behalf of Maidstone residents to ensure KCC considers the impact of the changes for our borough. Kent County Council is proposing changes to the Kent Community Warden Service due to financial challenges that require savings of 1 million by 2024-25. The proposed changes aim to retain the service's wide remit, objectives and community-based approach, but with fewer wardens and less coverage, reducing the team by 32 warden posts and 2 management posts, and a change in the allocation of wardens across the county. Maidstone currently shares 13 wardens shared across Maidstone, Tunbridge and Morling, with wardens allocated to 10 wards or groups of wards such as Headcorn and Harwich and Lenham respectively. The proposed changes will likely see significantly less wardens in Maidstone, meaning that some areas will lose their wardens altogether. Among our concerns are how the reduction in the service will impact on the support currently provided for residents, especially the vulnerable, isolated or those with complex needs. The wardens have played a key role in many communities, building relationships and providing support to individuals and communities as a whole. At a time when police community support officers have been withdrawn, the impact will inevitably put more pressure on acute health, policing, local authority services and even the charity sector, who in the current climate face their own challenges due to provide sustainable services. Those that were actually at Health and Housing and Environment Committee on the 7th of September will also recall that we wanted to suggest strengthening the response, I think it was to question 17, because with our EDI update last year, we introduced poverty as a protected characteristic. That has actually, on advice of the PAC or agreement with the PAC, that has now been incorporated in our response. And I think I mentioned at that Policy Advisory Committee as well that I had actually raised my concerns about the reduction, potential reduction in community wardens with the Police Crime Commissioner, and perhaps how it might affect them as a service. Surprisingly, he wasn't overly concerned. He didn't think it would, but I suspect they're perhaps looking at, they're coming at 2 different positions, and I think we perhaps sit somewhere in the middle, so we will see it sort of from both sides. So over to you, and I will happily try and answer any questions or take advice from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did Mr. James wish to add anything as by way of introduction?
Good evening, members. I'm Martin Jeans. I'm the Communities and Strategic Partnerships Manager. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Jeffrey, please.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you, Councillor Parfitt-Reid, for bringing the submission that you're hoping to make to a committee before it being made. My question, I suppose, and I support what you've written here. It's good. I wonder if it could be stronger in places, but you've made some good points. I suppose the question is, what is the impact on the police, on the NHS, and this council? The £1 million savings, are we going to see £2 million of cost in other public services? And that really worries me. So I do wonder if that could be strengthened within your response. Obviously, I don't expect you to have the answer in terms of that specific question.
Well, I do concur, and I think it is, again, things like community wardens I see as being that upstream work that prevents bigger problems down the river. So I think undoubtedly there is going to be an impact. Unfortunately, you know, we are where we are and we have to deal with the response as it is. If there's anywhere in particular you think we could use stronger wording, happy to take that on board, and happy to try and make our position as strong as possible. I mean, my concern is that Kent County Council will be potentially making this saving, but they're actually sort of going to be delivering a service which I don't think will work for anybody, dare I say it. And so, and again, I almost think you'd almost be better not to have them at all, rather than have a service that just are going to leave our wardens frustrated that they're trying to deal with too many people, too many issues, which, you know, that's not good for anybody's, if you like, their, not mental health, isn't that, but their sense of pride in the job they do, because being a community warden is, it is, I would imagine, quite a vocational role. And if you feel that you don't have the resources to do that job, it could be deeply frustrating and almost, in a way, cause more problems than not having the service at all. That's just my personal opinion, and I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parfitt-Reid. Councillor Round.
I think my question actually follows on from Councillor Jeffrey's and indeed your response. I agree. I mean, there's some particularly pungent points in this report that's been well worded from our point of view, but it is unclear from the proposal how the wardens will prioritise competing workloads to meet current objectives and deliver the same standard of work. That is a particularly pungent point. And a further pungent point is, whilst we feel it is important to retain the service, there is concern that proposed levels simply will not meet the demands and expectations of the service itself. But not only the service itself, it's the perception of the public that goes with it. They've actually had, in most of these communities, a very good community warden service, where these community wardens have almost deputised for the police at times. They've been voluntary social workers and social prescribers. They've actually been friends, counsellors, youth workers, crossing patrol supervisors, you name it. They've done an awful lot of extra special things in a community. They've done what they are, community wardens. Now, what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to ask and glean from all of this is that what alternatives have been looked at? Because when you consider, and go back to Councillor Jeffrey's point, he mentioned things like the health service and things like that. These people have overlapped. You know, if there was a Venn diagram of all the community services that exist, the community warden overlap into every single community aspect that there is. They do a bit of this and they do a bit of that. Has there been any creative actual proactive look at how community wardens can be better funded using services that do have other forms of money, not just Kent County Council, but social prescribing being one of them, police services and assisting them. Has that actually been investigated, and has anybody bothered to ask those questions and do that work? Because I think there's a lot more to it. Again, we're talking a subject which is not exclusively Maidstone Borough Council's proposal or role, because it's a KCC service. But having said that, is there any, and the Cabinet Member for Corporate Services and Finance is here, is there any capacity in our deficit to actually fund some form of community ward service ourselves? Can we be creative? Can we work on it? Can we look at some suggestion by bringing in other funding, not necessarily looking at our funds and deficits, but actually managing and bringing things together so we can actually have some sort of decent service? I mean, looking at the sums, I'm sorry to go on, but looking at the sums, we're looking at something that probably equates to around £250,000 for the service delivery of Maidstone. £250,000 in big funding terms, a couple of letters to the ministry, a couple of letters to our MPs, actual decent lobbying to Matthew Scott and various other people. We could possibly do this ourselves. I know there's a lot of work involved, it's asking for a lot, but has anybody been proactive and creative in thinking that?
Interesting questions there, Councillor Round. I'm not sure whether Councillor Parfitt-Reid or Councillor Perry should be answering that.
From the horse's mouth, he hasn't got any money. I do hear what you're saying. I mean, it's certainly something that you know, we could perhaps put that in the response, because obviously this is a response to KCC. We haven't been actually asked to look for an alternative solution within the borough or as a council. So in all honesty, I can't say we have done that work to see if we can fund it for ourselves. And it would be disingenuous to imply that we've thought about it, really, unless Martin can magic something out of his sleeve from his community protection team.
I guess the answer to that is these are tough decisions being made by the county council decision makers around what they feel they can reasonably deliver within their budgets. In the report, and what we try to do in supporting the cabinet member in her response, is to highlight our concerns in that we do think there will be an impact directly on NBC services. We do feel that there will be an impact on wider services such as the NHS and social services, and that the net impact of that impact will probably be more financially costly than the cost of delivering the service in the first place. Whether or not we have, I think, a unique position in Maidstone in that we have a community protection team that has been to this committee and various other committees to explain the extent of the work that we do. But it would be wrong to say that the community wardens haven't played a vital role in supporting some of that work, because where my officers have a unique set of skills and powers to deal with certain situations, there is an art or some finesse to the work that the wardens do in building relationships that perhaps the police and us haven't been able to build. So there will be a loss for sure, and I will probably have to go back to the head of service, John Littlemore, and others to see whether or not we would need to bring a report to the relevant cabinet member to put forward suggestions about where we might find that money from. But as has already been explained in the medium-term financial plan, we are limited in what we can do unless we are incredibly creative, which, as you quite rightly pointed out, would in itself be costly because we'd have to be thinking well outside the box. And we, as an authority, do that quite well. I'm just not sure we're there yet for this particular project.
But in the short term, the response could be tweaked to suggest simply that the county council should investigate external sources of funding and potential grants and whatever, and working with other organisations. So that would not necessarily commit MBC to anything, but it would suggest that the county council could start looking around. Would that sort of address your
exactly my point, Chair? Thank you very much, Chair. I just think that whilst we might be more innovative and creative at Maidstone Borough Council, we should put the ball back in KCC's court and ask them to be a bit more creative rather than just look at one solution and cutting it. I mean, they failed to look at the dynamic of what a community warden actually is and what a community warden delivers and does. And that dynamic is massive, and it could have been so integrated with many other pots of money, in my opinion, if somebody had bothered to put some work in.
Thank you. We'll move a little further and then we'll come back to that point. Councillor Cleater and then Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. As I declared an interest at the beginning that I am the union chair of the branch that represents community wardens, but I don't want to speak on that note. I actually work with community wardens in my day job, and I can tell you the amount of money they save. They pick up all the self-neglect, they're involved in children and families, they're involved in stopping children going down the wrong pathway. They're usually the ones that pick up the stuff that are then referred to social services. So if we're looking at savings, that £1 million saving is for the whole of the county. So the cost of, for example, thinking outside the box for Maidstone is going to be nowhere near that. So I think that's something to bear in mind and think about. In terms of the response, it needs to be really powerful, because we are going to get landed with a bill, all boroughs are, because there will be an increase in homelessness, there will be an increase in people suffering with mental health issues, who usually the community wardens are the first ones who pick up in terms of support and need and then refer on to the appropriate services. I've worked with people where it was the community warden who found the person wandering the streets in Parkwood, very, very unwell. This person wasn't on anyone's radar. And unfortunately, the days where people are supported by a telephone call isn't good enough. You have to do this stuff face to face. So we can respond as we can respond to this review, which is a review where KCC is saying we'd really like to make more cuts, but we don't think we get it past the public. So we'll offer them a bit of a sop to say, yeah, I can tell you now, because I've spoken to them. I was up visiting the community larder in Shetway, and the community warden I spoke to said, I've already handed in my notice. I've got a job elsewhere. I can't hang around waiting for deaths by 1,000 cuts. Now, they're going into a career where it is still helping people. But this was someone who'd worked for 30 years in social care as a community warden. That's the level of experience that we're going to be losing. So I agree with Councillor Round. I think we should be looking sort of outside the box. There's nothing to stop us doing that. It is clear that the areas that people are going to have to cover is going to lead to burnout of staff. That's the truth of it. I've spoken to these wardens. I deal with a number of them, as I say, in my day job, because my area goes out to Marden, Staplehurst, Harrietsham, Snodland, over across into Tunbridge and Morlin. But on this bit here, I'm just looking at Maidstone. I think we should investigate if there is a way we can do something. I think this is just a sop to stop people being really critical of cuts, in the same way that the family hubs proposal is to cover up massive cuts to youth and preventative services. These are your classic service that is going to save millions. The problem we've got is, as Councillor Round said, KCC's looking at saving their money, but actually they don't really care if we pick up the tab for what's going to go wrong. And we will on temporary accommodation, which is already a struggle. We will on homelessness. We will in dealing with issues on the streets that Martin's team work so hard with. So I would also send the response with a very, very robust letter. And I know you can do them, Lottie. So that would be my plea. But what's in there is good. But I don't think we can underplay the level of issues this is going to cause. So while people are worrying about which budget, at the end of the day, there's people who are going to suffer, and they're going to be some of the most vulnerable people, whether it's children, whether it's older people, whether it's people with disabilities. They're going to be at the sharp end of this. And it's to the shame that this is being produced, because I can assure you there is lots of places KCC can save money that doesn't impact on frontline services.
Thank you. I've got two more speakers, then I'd like, three now, and then I'd like to wrap it up because I think we're sort of in danger of violently agreeing with each other.
Thank you, Chairman. On the question 7A, I really think there's a point in the second to last paragraph where we say to discuss community safety concerns and shared action plans to deliver of the community safety partnership, and specifically I've missed my line, sorry. To discuss community safety concerns and shared action plans to reduce ASB, crime and community tensions. I really think here we need another paragraph. Because the one thing that there's mention here of crime, that there's mention about vulnerable adults. I first came into contact with community wardens before I was a councillor, and they were foot-based, and their impact and their reach with young adults is something which we fail to achieve in any other way. And I'll give you an example. There's a point in a young adult's life, especially if they're sort of hanging around in a group and there's some sort of mischievousness, where things can go one way or the other, and there's a tipping point. And I've actually seen community wardens tipping young adults in the right direction rather than the wrong direction. And I absolutely agree with the cost, because I've seen this service being an absolutely superb service. I've seen it taper down to cost cuts, and now we're facing this. As that has gone sharply down in terms of funding, I've seen antisocial behaviour sharply up. And as you say, that may not impact KCC and their budget, but it certainly does impact many other authorities. I've had very specific examples of people that I've worked with, young adults, where the community wardens know them. They see them, and you point somebody out and you say, "Oh, do you know that? Oh, yeah, that's such and such, such and such." They've engaged to the point where they go to the parks, they talk to these groups, and they're not seen in the same way as a PCSO, where everyone kind of shuts up. That they chat with them. When that person, one of those people in that group, is involved in shoplifting, and that person and the community warden is engaged, they talk to the parents, they talk to the schools, they talk to the person that's the victim of crime, petty crime, and those children can be turned around. And I've seen some very, very positive examples, but without them, without these community support wardens, we really are between the devil and the deep blue sea, I'm afraid. We got to this point several years ago. I think it was about seven years or so, when there was talk about either getting rid of the service or massively scaling it back. And I remember talking to a community warden that was entirely foot-based, and they said, "You know what, they've totally decimated the service, but they've given me a car because now I need to support 5 villages." And that really has crippled that link between people on the street and the schools, the parents, every aspect of the community. You will find that the community wardens are involved in. They go to the church. They encourage people to go to the church, not for a religious reason, because they have coffee mornings and they know that that person on their own will be coming and socialising when they wouldn't be without that sort of prompting. So I say, you've covered the vulnerable, but please mention this aspect of the positive impact on young adults, because I really do think that turning around of young lives is very important, and I think we've really watered that down, and we're about to do it again if we don't do something.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Just check what you're actually suggesting. You're suggesting that paragraph 3 is broken down into two.
Take a paragraph change in community tensions, and I think at that point, and I might not be able to wordsmith on the fly, but I think you have to say how positive an impact this service is on young adults, and especially draw attention to those that are maybe more vulnerable to a life of crime in the long term, and the support that community officers can give them where others might not be able to. I mean, I saw somebody a couple of years ago who saw me in the street and came up to me because I was involved in a case years ago, and he wanted to tell me about the fact that he's now self-employed, he's doing loft conversions, he's making really good money, he's bought his own van, and he was one of those people that was on the cusp, and he wanted to come to me and say, remember when this happened, I just want to say thanks about it. And I think that's happening across Kent, and we're losing something valuable here. The idea of actually scaling this down and us trying to work out how to recreate it seems folly.
Okay. Is that clear to you, Councillor Parfitt-Reid?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's really just making this paragraph bigger, and then perhaps we'll try and perhaps break it up into two so it's not quite so, because it's...
It can be negative because it's mentioning just about crime, and I think people, when they read that, they think, oh, there's this, you know, we've got to stop these youngsters causing this crime. It's the other side of that.
If we could go for the chair when you want to come back, but that's okay. Are you clear on what's being suggested?
I think I'm quite clear on what's being suggested, and I also, and I had thought this myself, Councillor Cleater's suggestion that we perhaps do a covering letter as well, because I don't know what everybody else's feelings are, but I think the questions do tend to funnel you down a direction, and I think if you can actually write your own, if you like, your own feelings, you write it in a way without being driven by the questions, because I remember reading some of the questions thinking it's actually quite difficult to disagree with this, and that, but if you're moving in a direction, yes, thank you.
Yes, it was quite. Councillor Springett, I think it was, at the PAC meeting pointed out just how leading these questions are, and I think Councillor Cleater's suggestion of a robust covering letter is a very sensible approach. I think members are generally in agreement with that. Councillor Hinder, sorry, Mr. James.
So if I just come back on that point, and it's poignant because not only is there currently a review on the community wardens, there's also a review on youth services. So members are minded to, I would remind members to look for that and to comment appropriately, because that's another area where this will be impacted. And the points made by members about, you know, we're acutely aware of everything that members have made in terms of the services that they provide. It's very difficult to get all of that concisely back into a response. But to take the point made about young people, we borrow from social services in that we encourage, through wardens, our own officers and the police, that we connect before we correct. And that's about how do you build relationships before you alter behaviour. And we know with young people in particular, That takes time, which is why we invested in the 326 Youth Club and supporting initiatives like Switch in the town. And youth services do currently provide outreach services, but they are the ones that are under review, so members should be aware of that, I think.
Are you in a position, Mr. Jones, or one of your colleagues, to circulate the link to that particular risk consultation to members, just so that we get the maximum response?
I can provide that to the portfolio holders to provide, if that's okay.
Thank you. That would be very helpful, so that we join up our responses. Councillor Hinder, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to bang the drum again that many of you have heard me say many, many times, and that is, you've been lucky that you've had a community warden. The north of this borough seems to be ignored quite a lot by the borough and even more by the county. We've never had a community warden, so if following this consultation you happen to lose your community warden, I'll quite happily give you what it's like without one, tell you what it's like without one. It's a shame, but what I would like to request is that if county go ahead with this and then borough pick up the bits and pieces, please could the borough remember that yes, there is life and residents north of the borough who would like to be included.
Thank you. I do understand, Bob, because I know, for example, the areas that I cover, you know, Staplehurst, Marden, a superb community warden that's been there for a long time. Cox Heath, we've had periods without them. Every week it seems to be a different community warden. So I do think there has been an inconsistency of service across the borough for sure. And like I say, in Cox Heath for a long time, we didn't have one at all. So I do take on board what you say. Thank you.
Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I support everything that's been said this evening, even Councillor Hinder's points. I take your point on that one. Mine's more of a general point, and in fact, I have to say it's more of a criticism, because this is far too nice. You're saying, well, it could have this impact, and it might have an impact, and, well, I tend to agree. I think we're missing a trick here. I think we ought to be going in to say we definitely strongly disagree, or we definitely disagree, or whatever it is. I haven't gone through marking everything, but where was one I saw? Just as an example, on page 163, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the wardens being community-based? I think we ought to go strongly agree on that one, and instead, in the language that we're using in the boxes, instead of saying, for example, fourth line down, the allocated resource for Maidstone could also struggle, I think we ought to be saying it will struggle, and I think we ought to give it welly. I want to thank you for the wording, for the gist, for the information that you've put here. My urge is that you go in with it strongly, give it welly. Don't give KCC a chance to say, oh, well, they tend to agree, I will get away with it then. Oh, that'll be all right. Oh, they don't strongly disagree, they only tend to, oh, that's all right then. Do you see what I'm trying to say? This is so important. And I know that when we did the feedback on, I think it was the family hubs, crikey, I was quivering in my boots reading that. Whereas this, I'm thinking, crikey, you need to put love and kisses at the end of it. Thank you, Chairman. Forgive me, I don't mean to be rude. I'm speaking with passion because this is a passionate subject. And while I'm here, forgive me, I do think that Martin Jean's teams worked their socks off. This is another case of, I appreciate KCC, they haven't got the money. They've got to stop doing something. The money isn't there. Unfortunately, the Borough Council, our staff, cop it. We take the bag, And I just don't know what we can do for the best, because somebody's got to do the work. Poor Martin, I'm surprised you don't sleep here overnight, you and your staff. But I think that's why I really want you to give it welly and stop being so really nice. Thank you, Chairman. I've gone off on one.
Right. We know the world is coming to an end, or there is a very seriously bad proposal being put around when Councillor Gooch says we're not being nice, we're being too nice, because our reputation is somewhat of, you know, mostly reprimanding people for doing the opposite. I'm going to take Councillor Parfitt-Reid, then Councillor Cleater, and that's it. We do need to wrap this up.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Well, I tell you what, we'll give it 2 wellies. And obviously we'll do the letter, which will come, I think, from a different angle, which will be more direct. So if you can just take it that that's what we'll do, we'll just go through it and give it a bit more oomph.
I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of your welly, I'll tell you that. Councillor Cleaton.
I think the reason why I tend to agree is because the way KCC words this, if you strongly agree, it means you're agreeing with their proposals, because that's how they word their, believe you me, I've had to fill in a few of these in my time. I think what would be useful in giving it welly is giving it welly in the letter, because otherwise I have to deal with the stats department at KCC all the time, because believe you me, we have these conversations about the staff survey every time it's run. And what they do is, where it's some things really, that they'll skew it so that we're agreeing with the proposals, not that we're disagreeing with the proposals. So I understand totally why this has been, the X has marked the spot where it is. I think the best way forward is to actually put that welly in the letter and explain the reason why we've answered that way, because their stat people, I can't even say it now, put your teeth in, Maureen, will do it the way they want to get the answer they want. And they do it all the time, and we always have to pull them on it. So I think the letter from yourself, Lottie, would be really, really good way forward.
We have generally a number of suggestions have been made. The letter was just referred to, which will be robust, making essentially some of the same points, but in more robust and vigorous terms. We have the suggestion from Councillor Clark flagging up the specific role that community wardens have had with supporting young people, young adults, I think he said. We have the specific suggestion from Councillor Round that the county proactively explore alternate sources of funding to maintain this or even improve the service. Is there anything else specific that members wish us to include at this point? Otherwise, I'm going to propose that the report be the cabinet members' response be endorsed with those additional points. Is that seconded? I need a seconder first. Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark. Those in favour? And I think we would like to record that was a unanimous vote, because that always goes down better. Right, do members want a very short break, or do you want to plunge on straight to the next relatively short agenda? Well, I think that's carry on then, shall we? I declare this meeting closed, and we move very quickly to the second meeting. Oh, Councillor Hindu. Next item is on another committee agenda. It's the Crime and Disorder Committee report. We need to close this meeting, which I've just done, and move to the next meeting, which is this committee sitting as the Crime and Disorder Committee. Do you want me to carry straight on to that meeting? In that case, I shall. Right. Good evening again. I'm Councillor Clive English, and I welcome you to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee acting as the Crime and Disorder Committee. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast live and recorded for playback. If anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? The assembled masses that remain? No? No indications. That was not to stop anyone, but just to make sure we know about it. Members are reminded again that they should only address the meeting by way of their microphone, which should be turned off when they're finished speaking, and please make sure mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent. If the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated and the Democratic Services Officer will assess the situation, and if she's feeling kind, come back and give us further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Item 1, apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Eagle, and can I ask if there are subsequently any substitute members?
Councillor Jeffrey for Councillor Eagle.
Thank you. Item 3, urgent items. There are none, but the minutes of the previous meeting held in July 2023 were circulated to the committee earlier today. January, I was optimistic there. I don't think there are any other urgent items. And I do see a visiting member, but I'm not sure she's here for this committee meeting, so there are no visiting members. Item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? No. Have any members of the committee been lobbied? No. Item 7, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I don't see any exempt items, so I move that all items be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed? Item 8, minutes of the meeting of the 18th of July. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No. In that case, I move that the minutes of the meeting be approved as a correct record and signed. Item 9, presentation of petitions. There are none. Item 10, questions and answer session for local residents. There are none. Item 11, there are no questions from members to the chairman. Item 12, we have a scrape report, a response to the report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Safety in the Town Centre. This is one of the positive results of the Constitutional Working Party, there were some, which produced a scrutiny protocol, which was something of an omission in the original draft, and we have therefore the response from the Cabinet to the recommendations of the scrutiny review, and I will now hand over to Councillor Parfitt-Reid to provide an overview of the response.
Well, really, I think the report speaks for itself. This is what this committee asked for. This is what we've returned. And it's not just a report on what we're going to do. Some of it has been actioned. So I'm going to keep it very brief and just welcome any comments. Thank you.
May I say from the chair, before anyone else has indicated, that it is interesting, Councillor Parfitt-Reid, the difference in responses you do get from different people, shall we say. Having been involved in the, like many members here, in the preparation of the original report, there are some changes of emphasis and some suggestions of doing some of the things we propose slightly differently, but I don't really see any significant omissions in this. And in general, I would say that the report is constructive and helpful. The response is constructive and helpful. However, I may have missed something somewhere, so if any members have any comments on anything that's been overlooked, we're not seeing that. What I would say then in conclusion, and I'm sorry that there's not masses of comments, but that's probably because I think members are actually quite pleased with the response that we have received from you on this particular issue.
Well, I'm pleased that members are pleased, and obviously, you know, a lot of work has gone into this, and particularly from Martin. And you know, obviously, I work with Martin on the community protection, and he always goes above and beyond and puts extra information in that I was expecting. So I wouldn't expect this to be any different. So,
Councillor Cannon.
Just briefly, Chairman, we've got on page 6 encouraging members to sign up to things. Can we just opt everyone in? I know we all have legitimate interest in finding out about these things. Can we get the communications department to just sign us all up, opposed to us being sort of encouraged to?
Mr. Jones?
Because it works off of an email, you have to physically go into it and say which ward you're interested in. So you can select the whole borough or just your individual ward where you live or represent. So it is a fairly simple process. So, but there's no automated way of doing it because of GDPR, etc.
Yes, unfortunately, the regulation does make it a bit clunky. Councillor Gooch, were you indicating? I wasn't quite sure.
I was. It was only a quickie, thank you, Chairman, and I can't see the example I was thinking of. On some of these, first of all, it made some encouraging reading, if I can say that, because I'm relatively new to this. I would have liked a little bit of indication as to timeframes. And I'm blowed if I can find the example I pinned out. I should have marked it. You're saying it will be included. I think it was to do with the switch working with the British Transport Police. Was that right? I've got one of those. But there was no time scale on it. Relationships, but there were a couple that I saw. One of them here, this will be raised at their next forum in a month's time, next year. It would just help get this whole thing into perspective. I'm sorry, it's only a small matter, but I would find it helpful. And I'm sorry I can't find the example. It's because I'm tired, sorry.
If you don't mind, because I've been quite involved in this, because it was came up originally from issues that were flagged up both from Bearsted Parish Council and from the Community Rail Partnership, more or less at the same time. The timeline is it's already largely been happening. If you've been travelling on the railways in Maidstone, I can't speak for the Marden line because I haven't had any direct experience and it's not part of the Community Rail Partnership, but I know the two lines that are, the Medway Valley line and the Kent Downs line, have seen a massive increase, not just in police activity, but associated revenue protection staff from South Eastern Railways going in and dealing with the people who were going on, travelling on the trains without tickets, and therefore basically having the opportunity to use the railway lines to travel to commit antisocial behaviour, and there's been a massive clampdown. It's also been quite good for South East Railway's revenue because they were losing money hand over fist on the Medway Valley line, so there's been a sort of triple benefit. I hope that didn't steal too much of what you're going to say.
No, not at all, Chair, and thank you for clarifying that for the room. And I guess in response, a lot of what we do is it's live. We met with our ward cluster for the town centre today. There were actions out of that were then put in place for the town centre task force, who then met late in the afternoon. So it's a very much a responsive, reactive approach, because we have to be live to changes as and when they happen. But I do take your point, and we do share with the cluster, and have shared with this committee previously, the horizon plan that we develop, which does sort of set out what we're going to aim to do in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, and the next year. Bearing in mind that we kind of have to stay relatively fluid depending on pressures from other areas of work. So hopefully that's reassuring.
Yes, it's a follow-up point. I mean, I'm glad to hear that engagement has taken place. Does that equally apply to Marden, Staplehurst and Headcorn line?
Absolutely, it does, and certainly at Marden, we're regularly seeing a lot of transport police, and you know sometimes there's a whole group of them. It's not just one or two. You know, it's 6, 7, 8. But I think it is very important what Martin is saying. This in itself is just, if you like, the skeleton of what we're doing. And yes, that I suppose that is the proactive work, but then there is all the muscles and the bones and the blood and everything else that is the reactive work, which always is ongoing, and you're always having to react to either individual situations or situations that are becoming problematic. So I think I understand what Councillor Gooch is saying, but we do have to be reactive as well as, if you like, put a strategy in place for how we deal with things. I don't know if that made sense. It's quite late and I'm quite tired.
I could say is unusually I had to miss the cluster meeting today. I usually attend them, but there has been a lot of progress on the issues flagged up over the last 2 years, and I'd encourage those members who haven't gone to their specific cluster meetings to do so and to get involved in those discussions.
And it's also important that, you know, ward members feel that they can come to me with any issues. I know Councillor Jeffrey has with the antisocial behaviour on the river and the wildlife, and then, you know, there are lots of channels for information sharing, and we need to use them cross-party, across the chamber, and, you know, and across to officers as well.
I'm not seeing anything else. So in conclusion, may I say, Councillor Parfitt-Reid, Mr James, this is so far a success story, but it's a work in progress, and the next we'll be appointing a rapporteur to review the progress and the situation as we go forward at a future committee meeting. And I would also remind members this is part of an ongoing multi-stream approach, and we will be looking shortly at enforcement, waste crime enforcement, which rather overlaps with some of the issues flagged up here. So that will reinforce, one hopes, the successful work that's being done here. So still some work to do. Thank you very much, members. So do we acknowledge the response and thank the Cabinet member for said response? I think that's what we are doing, isn't it? Thank you very much. And I therefore close the meeting. Thank you, members, officers, for your patience and your involvement on what's been a long evening.